If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 1, New Land, New Me. As I stared across the misty river flowing in front of me, I wondered if this was really the best idea. In all honesty, it was a bit of a gamble. After all, I was currently trying to start a cult in an oppressed country in hopes of becoming the most powerful being on this planet. The things that could go wrong with this plan are practically limitless, but then again, what good thing in life came without risk? Perhaps I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. It all started when I woke up in a pitch-black void, and at the same time, I woke up here in the land of water. One of my consciousnesses was laying down on the ground, staring up at the clouded sky in a daze. The other one was floating in the middle of this infinite darkness. It took me a few days to work out what was happening to me, but eventually, I discovered that I was God. Or, well, a god, at least. The first body that was floating in the void was me, a net of this moment, formless divinity drifting in endless darkness. The other one was a completely normal person's body that was sitting on a river bank waiting for my agreed meeting with a fisherman who would help me get across the river and into the land of waves. I realized early on that for anything my god self did, it cost a certain amount of energy. This energy was provided by my followers through their worship. I call it divine power. Everything that I had tried to do so far had barely given me a small spark of divine power. Even spending a full day just praying to myself only gave me enough power to cause a few blades of grass to grow or a single flower to bloom. Let's say that a full 10 days of prayer and meditation was enough to give me 1 unit of divine power. Creating a second body, for example, costs about 1000 units. Yet, either self-worship wasn't very efficient, or I was going to need a lot of followers. Considering the fact that my new body didn't even have chakra and seemed to be more like an average civilian from Earth rather than a ninja from Naruto, I considered it to be a bad investment. So, with all that being said, how was I supposed to gather enough followers to start earning enough divine power for me to become an almighty god? Simple, the Land of Waves. The Land of Waves was a small island nation stuck between the much larger nations of fire and water. Despite its location, it didn't really hold any strategic value. It was lacking in both resources and military power. But because of the lack of interest in the island, it had actually done pretty well for itself until Gato decided to ruin it all. Turns out, when everyone else has 3 world wars and almost constant fighting, you end up being a decent place to live by comparison. Of course, this all ended once Gat came around. His exploitation of the people turned a prosperous country into one just barely clinging on to life. I didn't know exactly how long before canon I was currently in, but I did know, from the nearby villages, that the Land of Waves forbid anyone from leaving or entering without express permission. Gat probably wanted to stop anyone from leaking news about his takeover to the other nations. Whatever his reasoning was, it made things difficult for me. My human body, who I decided to name Ayamu, was sitting on the bank of a river, patiently waiting for the fisherman. After some searching, he managed to find someone who was willing to illegally smuggle him into the country for a small fee. After another half an hour, I heard the sound of a boat coming my way. Sure enough, a small canoe-like vessel slowly rowed up to the shore where my body was standing. An old man wearing simple robes and a conical hat was sitting in it. He nodded at me as he got closer. "You the guy that wants to get into Wave?" I nodded. "Yeah, here's your money." I tossed a bag of RY over to the fisherman who caught it. The man opened it and checked it quickly before nodding again and waving his hand. "All right then, hop on." I obeyed, and the boat soon was set off back across the river. The fisherman spoke up once we had gone a while. "You know, kid, you might not know this, but Wave isn't exactly the best place to be right now." "I do, actually." He gave me a strange look. "I came to help." At that, he just shook his head in disbelief. "You came to help? By yourself? What are you going to do, kid?" I wasn't offended by what the fisherman said. I was well aware of how ridiculous I sounded. A lone person trying to save an entire country by himself? You'd be right to think I'm being silly. But I can't just sit by and watch this happen, you know. The fisherman raised an eyebrow. Why would someone who is clearly not from Wave care about it so much? Because even though I am but a humble priest, that doesn't mean that my ability to help people is any less. Anyone with the power to help others should try their best to do so. The fisherman still looked unconvinced but decided to stop arguing. After another half an hour or so on the water, we made landfall. "This is where we part ways, kid. Good luck doing whatever it is you're gonna do. I waved goodbye to the fisherman as he rowed off back across the river. With him gone, I turned around and set out for the nearest town. Now that I was here, I needed to get started on making a following. To start, I'd find the largest town and start gathering followers. From there, it would just be a matter of time. Creator's thoughts. Hello everyone, this is the first chapter and 1/4 for the pre-writ trend stuff, new stuff should be ready tomorrow. Chapter 2, Reputation Maxing. It had been days since I first entered the Land of Waves, and things were going, well, not great but not terrible either. Currently, Amo was standing on an empty crate outside of one of the poorer districts in the Waves' largest city, preaching. The reaction was about what I expected, a lot of people gave me strange looks and hurried away, some listened for a bit before realizing they had other things to do, and finally, there were the few who listened intently to my words, hanging on to every sentence. Friends, please listen to my words. This world is a place of chaos and uncertainty. Constant war and suffering seem to plague this planet. For those who live here on the Land of Waves, I'm sure you know better than most on how cruel life can be. Right now, I am giving a speech to around 20 to 30 people that were gathered around me. Most were homeless or beggars. While it wasn't as bad as in the series, there were still plenty of poor people here. For many of them, Gat's takeover of the country was the final straw that broke the camel's back. But despite all of this pain and suffering, we must still come together. Only through unity and perseverance can we overcome what life throws at us. All you who struggle each day with nowhere to go or no one to turn to, do not lose hope. When times are rough, remember the good things you still have and hold on to them. When times are dark, light a candle and share its warmth with those who need it. Praise the Watcher behind the stars. With those words, I felt a spark in my divine power pool. A small flash, like a static shock, before it faded. Yes, another believer for the collection. That makes 42. Soon I will rule the world. Well, maybe not, but the reaction to my preaching had been relatively positive. People were desperate for a way out, and even though I wasn't offering an immediate solution, just the idea that things could get better was enough for most. This did mean that people weren't exactly worshipping me, most seemed to think of God me as some sort of vague deity that would maybe save them if they just kept being good people. That was fine for now, but it meant I'd have to find a way to encourage them to actively pray to me rather than just thinking about me. And yes, I did name myself the Watcher behind the stars, it sounded cool and mysterious. Once I had finished my speech for the day, the crowd dispersed slowly. Most left quickly, while a few remained behind to talk to me or each other. Some wanted advice on what to do, others thanked me for giving them some hope, and a couple of them wanted to give me some food as a donation. I accepted their gifts gratefully and after conversing with the remaining people for a few more minutes, started walking towards the local orphanage. With all the turmoil this country faced, there were plenty of kids who lost their parents. I checked my divine power stockpile. DP 254.8. That was actually pretty good, turn out worshipping yourself is very inefficient. About one day of self-prayer yielded 0.1 DP while the same amount of time preaching earned me over 20 times that. As an added bonus, once someone decided to start praying to me, I got a vague awareness of them and the surrounding area, based on how faithful they were. It seemed that DP income from just having someone believe in you was proportional to how much they believed in you. The second variable was the amount of effort put into praying. Those who actually set aside time to pray to me provided significantly more DP than those who just casually thought about me. My thoughts were interrupted when I reached the orphanage and entered the main room. I was greeted by several children who excitedly ran up to me. They all started talking at once, asking questions, saying hello, or telling me about what they had done today. I smiled and patiently listened to each child before answering any questions they may have had. After saying hi to all of them, I made my way over to the director, a woman in her late 30s named Naruto. She was standing next to another caretaker, Haruka. They both noticed me approaching and waved. "Hello Amo-sama. I hope things went well for you today." Nariko asked. "They did, thank you," I replied as I took out most of the food I was given and handed it to her. "This should help a little." She frowned as she stared at the food in my hands. "Amo-sama, I'm grateful for your kindness but there's no need to go so far. If anything, we should be giving you food since you're taking time out of your day to help us out. Don't worry about me, I can take care of myself. You have a lot of children under your care, they need all the food they can get." "No, Don't think we haven't noticed you've been looking thinner over the past few days. Haruka said, crossing her arms. You've been giving us food every day since you've gotten here, and while we appreciate it, that doesn't mean you should starve yourself. Give us half of what you have. No more than that. Noriko said with a tone that brooked no argument. This was another part of my plan to cement my religion. I sighed reluctantly and looked around the room at the children who were now playing together or watching us curiously. Let's speak in a more private space then. They both looked confused but nodded anyway, leading me into a back room. Why did you want to talk here? Haruka asked after she closed the door behind us. Well, there's no easy way to say this, but I'm dying. Noriko gasped and covered her mouth in shock while Haruka's eyes widened. What do you mean? Are you sick? No, not quite. I have an incurable condition that will kill me within a few months. It's why I came here. I wanted to help those who needed it most before my time comes. To leave this world a better place than how I found it. Tears began gathering in Haruka's eyes as she realized that I wasn't joking, and Noriko was more put together but also clearly shaken up. Damn, I felt like an asshole for lying like this. I didn't expect for them to react this badly, since it's only been a couple of days. They seemed to have taken a liking to me fairly quickly. So, what exactly are we going to do about this? Noriko asked once she recovered slightly. Her voice had gone quiet, barely louder than a whisper. Nothing, I've already tried everything I could think of to cure myself. But it's proven to be useless. The best thing you two can do for me is to accept the food. Make sure these kids get as much out of life as they can before I'm gone. You're just going to give up? Haruka asked through her tears. She seemed to have been hit harder by the news than Noriko. But she was young, if I had to guess, she was in her early 20s at most. There's nothing else I can do, I'm afraid. I gave them a sad smile. While this might seem sudden for you two, I've known about this for quite some time now, so I'm more at peace with it than either of you. So please don't be too upset on my behalf. That's... Haruka began but stopped herself and lowered her head. Noriko looked conflicted for a moment before nodding slowly. If that's your choice, then we will respect it. It would be insulting if we insisted otherwise after hearing everything you've told us. Haruka didn't say anything, but I could tell she agreed with Noriko even though she was still clearly distraught. I promise not to leave without saying goodbye, I said. And you're sure there isn't anything we can do to help? Noriko asked again. She still seemed unconvinced by what I'd told them. I just shook my head. Unfortunately not. As I said, I've known about this for a while, 4 years to be exact, and I have been searching for a way to stop it from progressing, but nothing has worked. Both women looked saddened again when I said that, although they seemed more accepting of the situation this time. What exactly is this disease that you have? You've mentioned it being incurable, but why are you so certain? My chakra system is atrophying, the energy my body produces is steadily decreasing until it will eventually not produce enough to sustain my body anymore. Once it reaches that point, I will die shortly afterward. A medical nin or someone trained in the transfer of chakra could keep me alive longer by supplying me with their own, but it's not a permanent solution. The only thing that can save me would be to somehow regenerate my chakra system entirely. The two women both gave me uncomprehending looks upon hearing about my condition, clearly neither knew much about chakra. Noriko took a deep breath and placed her hand on my shoulder. Thank you for telling us everything, Ayama-sama, we appreciate your honesty. She paused for a moment before continuing to speak again. If there truly isn't anything else that can be done for you, then please allow us to do what little we can for you. Haruka nodded at Noriko's words. I refuse. They both looked at me with surprise as I spoke again. I know you want to help me, but that isn't necessary. What's important now is making sure these children get whatever they need. I already decided I will spend my last days trying to bring some good into the world, and this orphanage is one place where people are truly in need. They still didn't look too happy about it, but neither woman argued further with me either. All right, Ayama-sama, we understand, Noriko said reluctantly. Haruka continued to remain silent, but her expression showed she felt the same way as Noriko. I nodded at them both gratefully before we left the room. I spent the next hour talking with Noriko and Haruka as well as playing with some of the kids who wanted to play with me. It wasn't long until it got dark outside, and everyone started getting ready for bed. After wishing everyone good night, I returned to the streets, looking for a place to rest. I still felt bad about lying to them like that, but I crushed that feeling down. A religion isn't built in a few weeks, it takes years. Years I didn't have if I wanted to avoid having my worshippers wiped out by Madara or Kaguya. I could leave it all to Naruto and hope my presence didn't mess anything up too badly, but what if he didn't succeed? What if I just stood by and watched as this world burned? My god self relegated to watch over a dead world for a potential eternity sounded like hell. Not to mention all of the people who would suffer horribly because I was too scared to get involved. People like those kids in the orphanage. I wasn't a hero, but I'd be an absolute asshole after meeting all these kind and desperate people, then letting them die without at least trying to save them. But if actually making a religion took so long, how would I have enough DP to do anything? Simple, there was a way to boost a religion's growth in a relatively short amount of time. A martyr. While it sounded simple enough, it was difficult to pull off well. Any old fool could throw himself off a cliff and call it a sacrifice, but that wouldn't do much to encourage faith in any normal person. So my plan is simple, create a small following here on the land of waves, gain their trust. Then once Gat starts cracking down on my little cult, sacrifice myself. Me making up an incurable disease just made sure the select few that got close to me wouldn't be too broken up about my death. After all, if they already thought I was going to die anyway, dying to Gat would only be a minor change in their expectations. This body was useless in the long term anyway, without chakra, I wouldn't be able to survive in this world of magic super ninjas. And since this body lacked a chakra system, it was utterly impossible to use jutsu with it, even after years of training. At most, I'd be able to perform taijutsu techniques, and even then, I wouldn't be anywhere near the level of a true shinobi without the help of chakra enhancements. So this body would pave the way in blood, a sacrifice to hopefully elevate my godly self into something powerful enough to change things in this world. After that, I'd hopefully have enough DP to help them overthrow Gat or at least push him out of the country. If not, well, hopefully I had enough DP to make another body for myself to possess. And if not even that works then. Well, let's just hope this goes well. Creator's Thoughts. Chapter 3, Please dedicate your life to me. It had been almost 2 months since I began preaching in the land of waves. Currently, Ayamu was standing on a small stage, leading my followers in prayer. At this point there were about 200 people consistently listening to me, and my godly self could sense about double that number with some amount of faith in me. O great watcher behind the stars, guide us through these dark times. Be our light in this time of darkness and show us the way forward. Bring peace and prosperity to us all. As I finished, everyone else joined me in reciting the prayer. Praise the Watcher. As the chorus of voices rang out throughout the room, I felt a large burst of energy fill Godme's being, increasing my pool of DP. Once again, praying is truly a massive boost to DP gain. But while the sermon was winding down, I spotted something that made me pause. At the edge of the crowd, leaning against the back wall of the room, was a tall man with slicked back black hair and an unshaven face. His outfit consisted of a loose-fitting grey shirt tucked into his black pants, with a belt around his waist. He had a sword on his waist and was well built with broad shoulders and a muscular frame. I think the time was approaching. Gat must have finally sent someone to investigate my cult. They had been gaining popularity fairly quickly lately, it's only natural he would want to check them out himself after hearing about such a large group suddenly popping up out of nowhere. I checked my DP just in case he cut me down on the spot. DP 1534. Good enough. After dismissing the congregation, I noticed the man still hadn't left yet. He stayed behind even after everyone else had gone home. As soon as we were alone, he stepped forward towards me. Excuse me, sir? Do you have a moment? The man asked politely enough, though there was an underlying hint of coldness in his tone. Yes? Can I help you? I was hoping to speak with whoever was organizing this whole event here today. He looked around at the empty hall we were standing in. Would that happen to be you? Yes, I'm the one leading these sessions. How may I assist you? I replied calmly. My name is Kinro by the way, he introduced himself. His voice took on a more formal quality as he continued speaking. I work under Gatsama as part of his security force. Bingo. Oh. Well then, welcome, Kinro-san. My name is Ayamu, nice to meet you. As a member of Gatsama's security force, it's my job to keep track of any possible troublemakers within Wave. You see, we can't allow anyone or anything to disrupt peace and order here. His eyes narrowed slightly at those words before continuing, so I wanted you to stop whatever this is right away. It's very unsafe having this many people standing around in one place. I'm afraid I can't do that, I said firmly. The man seemed annoyed when I refused him outright like that, but quickly regained his composure again. Look kid, since you don't seem to get it, let me spell it out for you. You're attracting too much attention. It makes my boss nervous, so he sends guys like me out to check things like this out. We find problems and eliminate them before they become bigger problems later down the line. I simply smiled at him patiently. What exactly are you implying, Kinro-san? Don't play dumb with me boy, he hissed as he leaned forward threateningly, his voice taking on a rougher edge. If you know what's good for you stop this whole thing before it goes any further. You hear? Or else we'll be back here real soon, and we won't be nearly as nice next time around. Please tell Gat he can send whoever he wants to try and silence us, but all it will do is show how much of a coward he really is. Go back to your master, lapdog. You aren't welcome here anymore. I spat out with feigned anger. I think my performance was rather convincing. Kinro's face twisted into a scowl. He took a step towards me before stopping himself short. His fists clenched tightly by his sides. For a second, I thought he might attack right then and there. But instead, after taking several deep breaths, he relaxed slightly and spoke again in a low voice tinged with rage, "You better watch yourself boy." With that parting shot, Kinro turned around and left. Hopefully, that was enough to set Gat off. If he tried the same public execution method he did with that one guy in the original series, it would save me a lot of DP. Now I just had to gather a few people willing to take over Ayamu after he dies. Luckily, I already had several candidates lined up. Haruka was cleaning the kitchen when she heard someone knocking on the front door. She quickly dried her hands and went to answer it. Upon opening the door, she saw Ayamu standing there with his usual calm expression. "Ayamu-sama. What brings you here so late? It's almost nightfall. I apologize for coming unannounced like this, but I needed to speak to you about something important." His tone seemed serious, which worried Haruka slightly as he continued to speak. "Could you meet me in an hour? Near the Nura River Bridge? I have some other people I need to gather for this meeting." Haruka nodded slowly while trying to process everything he'd just said. He sounded urgent enough that she didn't want to keep asking questions until later. While normally, she would refuse to leave the orphanage so late at night, she could tell by his demeanor that this wasn't something she should decline. Ayamu deserved at least that much respect from her, considering all he had done for them in these last couple of months. Not only did he donate almost all of the food he collected during his sermons, but he also helped out whenever possible around the city, always willing to lend a helping hand without expecting anything back in return. Seeing him get thinner and thinner each day was heartbreaking. It reminded Haruka that Ayamu would be dead soon and that there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "Oh okay." The man simply gave her a small bow before leaving. He began walking away down the street, presumably going off to meet with whoever else he wanted to talk to. She watched as his figure slowly disappeared into the distance before closing the door behind her. An hour later, Haruka was waiting patiently next to the bridge for Ayamu when she noticed someone approaching her from across the riverbank. As they got closer, she recognized them as being one of Ayamu's followers, a woman wearing simple clothes named Hikari. "Haruka-san. You're here too!" she exclaimed happily upon seeing the young caretaker. The two women greeted each other warmly before settling down together near where they were meeting Ayamu. "What do you think this is all about?" Hikari asked curiously after a few moments of silence passed between them. "It must be pretty important if he wanted both of us to come out here at night like this." Haruka thought for a moment before responding, "I'm not sure, but whatever it is, I'm certain we'll find out soon enough." As if on cue, another person walked up to join their conversation shortly afterwards. It was a young man with short brown hair and a lean build, dressed in plain attire similar to what most civilians wore around town. Another follower of Ayamu. She didn't know him, but he always in the first row, listening to Ayamu speak. "Oh hey ladies! What are you doing here?" he said cheerfully as he came over to greet the two women. "Kenji-san." "Good evening," Hikari replied politely while Haruka just nodded at him silently. "So why did our dear priest call us all here tonight anyway?" Both women exchanged glances with each other before shrugging simultaneously. Kenji sighed, disappointed, but didn't press any further since neither of them seemed willing to share anything more than that. Soon enough though, Ayamu arrived along with yet another follower following closely behind him. This one she actually knew very well. It was an elderly man, about 60 years old, who worked as a doctor. His name was Kazuo, and he had been treating the kids at her orphanage before she even started working there. In fact, he was technically retired now but still helped out whenever he could. She respected the old man greatly for his tireless efforts to provide aid to those less fortunate, despite having no obligation or reason to do so anymore. Everyone quickly gathered together once they saw the two newcomers arrive. "Thank you all for coming," Ayamo began speaking without preamble. "I know most of you have busy lives outside of our little community, so I really appreciate your willingness to take time out of your day like this." All four people nodded their heads in agreement while Ayamo continued to speak again. "Before I get to the main point of this meeting, though, I would first like everyone here to introduce themselves. Please tell us your name, occupation, and why exactly you joined my sermons." "Why?" asked Kenji, raising an eyebrow curiously. "Just so everyone is on the same page going forward. We will be talking about something fairly important shortly, after all." Everyone else seemed satisfied by his explanation, except for Kazuo, who simply frowned slightly before nodding reluctantly. "My name is Haruka," the caretaker spoke up hesitantly after everyone fell silent once more. She paused momentarily as she collected her thoughts before continuing to talk again. "I help run a small orphanage in town. I've been listening to your sermons ever since you started doing them because I wanted something positive in my life again, and..." Her voice trailed off quietly as she blushed slightly and looked away, embarrassed. She didn't want to say out loud that she mostly only came to the sermons to make Ayamo happy. Hikari suddenly giggled softly next to her, which caused Haruka to glare angrily at her friend for laughing at such an inappropriate moment, but it had little effect on the other woman, who merely smiled back mischievously instead. "I'm Hikari, a seamstress. I originally just went because I heard about you from some of the others around here," she explained with a smile while glancing at Haruka and Kenji respectively. "But I kept coming back because, well, I prayed for my sister's health and she got better. She's still sickly, but she doesn't have any problems breathing anymore." Ayamo nodded at her words patiently before turning his attention towards Kenji next. The young man grinned widely when he realized it was finally his turn to speak up. He immediately began rambling excitedly about himself, without hesitation whatsoever. "My name's Kenji and I used to be a fisherman like my old man before he passed away last year due to illness." His cheerful expression faded slightly as he recounted this memory but quickly perked right back up again afterward. "But I found another job working at a local factory where I met some of our fellow followers who told me about your sermons. And ever since listening to one, well, I became convinced that the Watcher is truly watching over us." He exclaimed passionately while gesturing wildly with his arms in excitement, causing both Haruka and Hikari to smile amused at his enthusiasm. Kazuo, however, remained stoic throughout the entire exchange and didn't react much beyond giving the young man an unimpressed stare. "Be quieter," Kazuo grumbled, clearly annoyed by Kenji's loud voice. The young man blinked owlishly at him for a second before sheepishly rubbing the back of his head as he apologized quietly under his breath. "And you?" Ayamo asked patiently once things settled down again. "Kazuo. Doctor," he stated bluntly without elaborating further, which earned him an exasperated look from everyone else present except for Ayamo, who simply nodded understandingly. "Well then." The priest trailed off as he glanced around at each person gathered around him one last time before continuing to speak again. "Gad has taken notice of my preaching." Everyone tensed up immediately upon hearing those words, their expressions ranging from nervousness to outright anger depending on who you looked at. "Earlier today, one of Gad's men showed up after I finished and tried to threaten me into stopping what we're doing here. That bastard!" Kenji exclaimed angrily, while Hikari gasped softly beside him in shock. Haruka stayed silent, but she couldn't hide her own worry either. It seemed like only Ayamo himself remained calm despite the tense atmosphere surrounding them all. "So, the sermons will stop then?" Kazuo asked, clearly displeased by this development. "No," Ayamo said firmly, without hesitation. "I'm not going to stop, regardless of what happens next." His tone left no room for argument, his eyes were filled with determination as he met each person's gaze steadily before continuing again. "Gat will kill you, boy," Kazuo said matter-of-factly, but there was an underlying hint of concern hidden within his gruff demeanor that made it obvious he cared about Ayamo despite his attitude suggesting otherwise. "He may seem like a cowardly rat with too much money, but he is ruthless when threatened." "I know," Ayamo replied simply while looking directly into Kazuo's eyes unwaveringly, causing the older man's mouth to twist into a frown once more. What do you mean, I know? Kazuo demanded hotly, clearly upset by Ayamo's lackadaisical attitude towards this whole situation. Who will preach about the Watcher when you are dead? You will. Ayamo stated calmly, causing everyone present including Kazuo to look at him in surprise. Him? Kenji asked incredulously as he pointed at Kazuo questioningly with a puzzled expression plastered across his face. No. Ayamo replied bluntly, which caused Kenji's jaw to drop open slightly as he stared back dumbfounded. What? You all will, Ayamo clarified without missing a beat before continuing again. I want each of you here today to become a leader for our people. Haruka couldn't help but feel guilty. She didn't really believe in the Watcher that much, only going because she knew it would make Ayamo happy to see her there. But even so, how could she refuse such an earnest request from someone who had done nothing but try his best to help others? Okay. She said quietly while nodding slowly. Are you mad, boy? Kazuo exclaimed angrily while glaring fiercely at the young priest standing before them all. You plan to let yourself die for nothing and expect us to pick up where you left off. We barely know anything about the Watcher. I'm not even sure I believe in him. Ayamo simply smiled sadly when he heard those words. Haruka already knows, but I won't be alive for much longer anyway. Gad or not, I'll be dead within a month. His tone was light despite the heavy weight of his words hanging over everyone's head like a dark cloud threatening to burst open at any moment now. Although even Haruka doesn't know the extent of my condition. Haruka blinked in surprise upon hearing this news and looked at Ayamo curiously, prompting him to continue explaining further. A better way to say it is that I'm not just dying soon, rather I am already dead, Ayamo clarified without hesitation. Everyone stared wide-eyed as they tried their hardest to comprehend what exactly he meant by that statement, but before anyone could ask anything else, he spoke again first. My body is already empty of chakra. I have been surviving only by the grace of the Watcher these past 2 years. There was a long pause after this revelation during which no one knew quite what to say or do, until finally Kazuo stepped forward with an unreadable expression on his face and grabbed Ayamo firmly by the arm. Without saying another word, his hands began glowing green as he quickly scanned Ayamo's entire body using medical ninjutsu before releasing him again moments later. You're telling the truth. He stated softly while looking down at Ayamo with disbelief written plainly across every inch of his features. There isn't a single drop of chakra in your body. Everyone else present seemed confused, not really fully understanding how impossible that was supposed to be. Ayamo seemed surprised by Kazuo's actions but didn't react beyond smiling slightly when he heard those words from him. I didn't know you were trained in medical ninjutsu. He shook off his surprise quickly however and instead focused back onto the task at hand once more. The full reason of why I'm like this and why I do not care about that fact is complicated. But I will show you. Ayamo suddenly turned around and started walking away from them all, causing everyone else to follow him. Where are we going? Hikari asked hesitantly while looking around worriedly, confused at the many revelations today. It was getting dark, and she didn't want to get stuck in the wilderness. We are going far away from the city, what I am about to show you cannot be seen by anyone else. Ayamo replied simply without slowing down or stopping his stride whatsoever, which only served to further confuse everyone following, including Haruka herself who couldn't shake off her feeling of, not quite unease but definitely discomfort over all these recent developments taking place one right after another like some sort of bizarre dream. They walked until the sun had set completely beneath the horizon, leaving them bathed under moonlight. Only then did Ayamo finally stop walking once more, causing everyone to look around curiously. We're here, he stated simply before turning back towards everyone gathered before continuing. I chose some of you because of your determination, Ayamo glanced at Kenji, some of you because of your keen minds, he glanced at Kazuo and Hikari, and others because of your kindness, he glanced at Haruka before looking at everyone else once more. All of you lack true faith in the Watcher. There are many others who believe far more than any of you, but that's fine. Because the best followers are not made through words and promises, they are made through action and proof. I will show you now exactly what I preach, and only then can you truly believe. With those final words spoken, Ayamo turned around to face an empty field before raising his hands into the air above his head as if he was praising the sky. You who has existed since time immemorial, you who dwell in the realm beyond our sight, you lay hidden behind the stars, watching over us all. Everyone tensed up as they felt a weight settle over them, a sense of foreboding unlike anything else they had ever experienced before, as Ayamo continued chanting without pause or hesitation. O Watcher of the Cosmos, please grant unto this humble servant thy guidance." As soon as these last words left his lips, the sky above seemed to split apart. Stars began swirling around like fireflies dancing through night air until finally coming together into a single point directly overhead, forming a massive face composed entirely of stars. But, its eyes were closed, all three of them. It remained still, serenely suspended high up amongst the endless sea of twinkling lights. The silence that followed afterward seemed deafening compared to Ayamu's loud chant from earlier. "Do any of you notice something wrong?" Everyone startled at Ayamu's sudden question, breaking them out of their stupor. It took several seconds before anyone could even think straight enough again to answer him properly. "The eyes," Kazuo said after another long stretch of uncomfortable quiet passed by between everyone present once more. "Why aren't they open?" "The Watcher has been forgotten," Ayamu explained patiently, while gesturing towards the three closed eyes of the Watcher. "He is older than this nation, he is older than the Sage of Six Paths, he has existed since time immemorial, but his followers are long gone." The four were stunned silent, not knowing what to say or do in response to such a bizarre sight before them. Maybe they were exterminated, maybe they abandoned him for a shinier idol, maybe he abandoned them first, Ayamu continued without waiting for anyone else to speak up again. "But no matter what happened, with nothing tying to the mortal world, he has fallen into a deep slumber, and I am going to wake him up." "Is that why?" Hikari whispered softly as he stared at Ayamu intently. Haruka meanwhile, was uncomprehending at what was happening. "You are using yourself as a sacrifice," Kazuo said. Ayamu nodded, acknowledging his words. "Why?" Kenji asked. His voice sounded small compared to how excitedly he spoke earlier, almost childlike even. It seemed like he still couldn't quite wrap his head around everything that had just transpired so quickly in front of him. "I found information about the Watcher a couple of years ago. It told of an ancient religion that worshipped a being beyond mortal comprehension, who ruled over the night sky and stars. Desperate and with all the doctors giving me months to live, I prayed to him. It was a desperate thing, full of fear and despair." Ayamu paused as he looked up at the starry visage above them. "But even though he slept, it seemed even the smallest of prayers roused him enough to answer me. My body's chakra system withered away, but my body survived. I tried other prayers, greedy for more, prayers of power and wealth, but nothing happened. I thought it was punishment for my greed. But eventually, my body started to wither away again. And in desperation, I prayed for more time. He answered again, giving me another few months of life." Ayamu stopped, closing his eyes as if remembering something from long ago. Then he opened them again slowly before continuing once more. This repeated itself several times until finally one day. I found the prayer to invoke the Watcher. Everyone else present remained silent throughout Ayamu's entire explanation, listening intently without interrupting him even once throughout his whole speech thus far. When I cast the invocation for the first time, the Watcher appeared just like this. He gestured upwards towards where the Watcher currently sat motionless above everyone gathered beneath, its massive form composed entirely out of glittering stars and swirling galaxies within deep space itself. He remained still, silent. For days, I tried to talk to him, tried to understand him better than just these small bits of information left behind by an ancient people. Eventually, I understood that while he could hear me, his mind was sleeping, not conscious. But Ayamu paused again briefly here as he took a deep breath before resuming once more. "But even though his consciousness slept, he still answered my prayers, even now, he still answers when I pray for someone's health." Hikari gasped quietly as she remembered how her sister had gotten better after Ayamu prayed for her. Ayamu turned to look at everyone else gathered behind him, his mouth set into a small smile. "Is that not worthy of worship? A being who has no connection to the mortal world, a being that even deep asleep will answer a simple prayer for health from a non-believer, is that not truly something worth calling a god?" Everyone except Kazuo nodded slowly, clearly moved by what they were seeing right now. "And so, after receiving life several times over from the Watcher, I will give it back. I will give him a following, full of kind people, of determined people, of clever people. I will give up myself to wake this slumbering god." Ayamu's voice echoed through the darkness surrounding them. There was another pause after these words left his lips before anyone spoke again, finally breaking the silence once more as Hikari stepped forward hesitantly before asking Ayamu one last question. "What do you need us to do?" Ayamu smiled softly at her request, nodding his head ever slightly in approval. "Continue my sermons in secret, recruit others who are like-minded, teach them of the Watcher, gather your strength," he said simply. One day, wave will shine again. Ayamu reached into his robe and pulled out several scrolls from within before handing each person present here today their own scroll respectively. All the information I managed to gather about the Watcher is here. He explained calmly without waiting for anyone else's reply first. It should help you when you try teaching others about him later on down the line, in case Gat moves against me tomorrow and I cannot meet with any of you again, just read these. It will explain everything I know about him. Everyone nodded solemnly, still somewhat stunned by all this new knowledge being thrown upon them suddenly like some kind of dream, but they didn't dare question whether or not what Ayamu had shown them was real anymore. Not after seeing such an amazing sight unfold before their very eyes earlier. Now, Ayamu spoke up again, suddenly breaking everyone out of their thoughts once more, causing everyone else present to focus back onto him instead. I think I will stay here for a while, meditating and praying. Feel free to join me. Ayamu sat down on the ground and crossed his legs before closing his eyes silently before beginning his prayers for the night ahead of him. Creator's thoughts. 3/4. This is the first time I have used this website and I already hate creating snappy titles, I'm not funny enough. Chapter 4, Pulling a J-Man. Holy fuck. I should change my godly name to Scammer Behind the Stars. I rolled high on the gacha. I didn't even know that Kazuo knew medical ninjutsu, that would come useful later on once I had enough DP to bless followers with enhanced learning. I wasn't the one who healed Hikari's sister either, of course. Now that I knew about it, I was keeping an eye on her to make sure she didn't relapse. I could feel the jump in faith as soon as they saw the Watcher's visage above us. All of them were now firmly in the top 10 of most faithful believers, and I'm pretty sure everyone else in the top 10 list were actually insane, like clinically. DP 1483. I spent around 60 DP on casting that illusion. After all, Ayamu has no chakra, so I had to spend DP on faking something like that. Of course, I only cast it on the 4 people there with me. If anyone else saw us, they would only see 5 people looking at a normal sky. While it did seem overly elaborate, I felt it was necessary to truly cement my religion in these people's minds. Anyway, I got 5 DP back just from my 4 Skemtarg priests in training watching my illusion. Not a bad return, all things considered. By this point, I was fairly certain that Gat would be coming after me today. It seems he moved fast because just this morning, I noticed several of his goons staking out the area around the place I usually held my sermons in. They tried their best to act casual about it, but, well, let's just say they weren't very good at being subtle or blending into crowds properly. It also seems Kazuo and Hikari chose stay far away from the main grout, probably the smartest move as to not implicate themselves in what I was going to do, but Kenji and Haruka were here today, still doing their parts. Once again, we started our prayer session and soon enough people began arriving steadily until eventually almost everyone had arrived by now. Good morning everyone. I greeted politely while smiling brightly towards everyone gathered around me today before continuing to speak again. I'm glad so many of you still show up, despite Gat's persistent attempts at crushing your spirits. Several murmurs rippled through those present here today upon hearing my words. While I didn't shy away from encouraging a bit of dissent against him, I was normally much more cautious when it came to insulting him directly, so this must have been quite surprising for everyone present. I glanced around at everyone's faces carefully before speaking once more. It seems most of them were growing increasingly angry and frustrated with how things currently stood under his rule over Wave. I know that most of you have had enough of living under his tyranny, of being treated like slaves, of having your hard-earned money taken away just because he wants more power than what he already has. More angry murmurs echoed throughout the crowd surrounding me as my voice grew louder and more forceful with each word spoken aloud. But no matter what happens next, you must remain strong. Remember why we pray for the Watcher. Not for ourselves, but for our families, for our friends, for our loved ones, to ensure they will live better lives than us. Just as I was about to continue speaking further, I noticed a short man wearing expensive clothes approaching from behind the crowd. His face twisted into an ugly scowl as soon as he caught sight of me standing atop my stage platform. Behind him, I saw several thugs fanning out behind him, wielding various weapons ranging from knives to swords to clubs. They began pushing people aside roughly in order to make way for their leader, who was striding forward towards me without hesitation whatsoever. Upon seeing this, everyone else immediately fell silent and moved out of their way quickly, allowing them easy passage through the masses gathered around my makeshift podium. Well, care to repeat that bullshit again? The man shouted angrily up at me while glaring hatefully back down at everyone else present here today. Everyone's attention shifted between us nervously, not knowing exactly how things would play out next but certain it wouldn't end well regardless. I simply smiled serenely back at him before responding calmly once more, certainly. I said that no matter what happens next, we must remain strong. He growled, like actually growled. What was he? A dog? Cute. He snarled menacingly while motioning for his men to surround me completely now before continuing to speak again. You seem pretty confident given your situation here, boy. Everyone tensed up, likely remembering the previous times Gat had killed those who opposed him publicly, but I just continued smiling pleasantly back at him anyway. I am confused, what situation? I asked innocently. My tone remained light despite everything going on around me currently, which only served to further infuriate him. He visibly calmed himself before speaking again. I will give you one chance to walk away from all this nonsense, he said coldly without waiting for a reply first before continuing to talk once more. If you stop preaching right now and never do so again, then I'll let you leave unharmed. That actually surprised me. I was expecting him to just go straight to the violence part. Guess he's smarter than I expected. But unfortunately for him, I am a god. No. The moment I said that word, I gathered a good chunk of my DP and inserted deep into Gat's mind. All of it carried a single message. I should burn this priest alive. Surprisingly, it was more expensive than I expected it to be, costing around 500 DP for some reason. That's almost 10 times more expensive than casting that illusion was on my 4 successors. If my god self had a face, it would have frowned in displeasure right now. But considering how much DP I will get back from what I have planned, it was an acceptable trade-off. I shoved those thoughts into the back of my mind. I could experiment later. Right now, I should focus on my SCA followers. Gat stared silently back at me after hearing my refusal before nodding slowly. I see, that's truly unfortunate. His voice trailed off quietly as he looked away from me towards his men instead. Go get some firewood, oil, and a big enough steak. He ordered curtly before turning back around to face me once again. A wicked grin spread across his lips as he continued speaking again. Waraji, Ziri, break his limbs. His 2 goons stepped forward with malicious grins on their faces. I, of course, tried to kick the shorter one in the balls. I think this one was Ziri? But he simply swatted away my leg effortlessly before grabbing hold of it tightly between both hands. His grip felt like steel vices clamping down hard against my skin beneath his fingers. Oh well, to be fair to this body, it didn't really have any muscles in the first place, and I did deliberately give away most of the food to the people who needed it. So my condition isn't exactly up to par for fighting anyway. Ziri pulled out a metal pipe from his belt, and swiftly struck my knee with a loud crack. My kneecap shattered instantly. I ignored the pain but let out a grunt anyway. I wanted to seem tough but not completely unnatural. I also ignored the burst of DP from most of the people around us, praying for my safety. Damn, I haven't even martyred my human self yet, and I was already getting more DP than what I gathered during the first couple of weeks. The 2 goons continued their assault upon my body without mercy, breaking bones until eventually Gat ordered them to stop. I let some appropriate grunts out here and there, but otherwise didn't say anything else as they worked their way through, breaking every limb possible. Now that you've had enough fun, he growled lowly before motioning towards where his men had returned carrying large bundles of wood and a large post, about 1.5 times my size. One of them proceeded to smash a hole into my little stage, and rammed the stake inside. Hey, assholes, I worked hard on this stage. I shouted. Well, I tried to shout, it came out as more of a hoarse rasp after everything this body had been through. The goons only sneered at me before grabbing hold of my broken limbs once again, roughly dragging me over towards where they set up their makeshift impalement device earlier. Tie him up, Gat said calmly while watching all this unfold with cold indifference evident in his eyes. His men obeyed immediately by tying rope around both wrists tightly, then wrapping another length around my waist before attaching it securely onto the wooden pole itself via several iron nails hammered deeply into its surface. Gat glanced at me with suspicion when he saw how little resistance I was putting up against their actions, but his natural inclination for killing dissenters and my compulsion was too strong. He did nothing to stop what was happening. One of his goons took out a jar filled with lamp oil from inside his jacket pocket before opening it carefully and pouring most of its contents all over myself and the pile of wood beneath me. Well, damn, that's going to burn really quickly. I prepared some DP, ready to use it at any moment to make sure Ayamu doesn't die too fast from burning alive. Go on then, pray to your god, Gat spat. Maybe he will come save you. I just smiled and started praying like usual, 42 DP down the drain to make sure my voice was clear and loud, another 214 DP to keep myself alive until I needed to. O Watcher above! Forgive these poor, foolish mortals. For they know not what they do. Gat snarled in irritation at my continued defiance towards him before turning away from me completely now. Enough of this crap, light it up. He yelled angrily back over his shoulder as he strode off, not even bothering to look back at us anymore. Oh nice, that means I don't have to use DP on him to hide what I am about to do next. Although only about half the thugs left along with Gat, which means I will cry for my poor DP when I cast illusions on the rest of them. Oh well, hopefully, a spectacle like this would be worth it. As one of the remaining goons threw his lit matchstick onto the pile of oil-soaked wood beneath me, I began shouting once again. O Watcher above! May those who still believe in you be blessed. May your guiding hand bring them salvation. May all those who stand against you know only darkness for eternity. I could feel the faith growing amongst my followers as I spoke those words aloud, causing me to smile slightly despite myself before continuing further. But just as fast the fire burned up towards Ayamu's body, I could feel the body's pain, but at the end of the day, mortal pain could not faze God me. I do not ask you to save me. I do not ask you for your blessings. All I ask is that you give these people hope. Give them something worth believing in again. Give them back their faith. By now, the fire had reached high enough that it began licking at my face, my blessing making sure that this body remains alive through all the pain and injuries. So please, grant unto this humble flock your protection. Shelter them from harm. Heal them when sick. Feed them when hungry. The crowd was being moved to tears, many sobbing openly or crying out quietly while praying alongside me. As the flames fully consumed Ayamu's body, I struck again. Every thug remaining saw nothing out of the ordinary. In fact, in their eyes, this was going perfectly as planned. To them, my human body started screaming. But for everyone else, the sky turned dark, day turning to night as the sun was devoured by a sea of stars. A familiar visage formed once more above us all. The three closed eyes stared down from above at Ayamu burning beneath his gaze. O Watcher above! I give you my soul. So that your will may be done here on earth once again. The eyes slowly opened, one after another, revealing bright golden orbs gazing down upon us with an expressionless stare. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing nothing but darkness within its depths. A large hand formed out of swirling galaxies and stars reached down towards Ayamu, gently wrapping around something invisible inside Ayamu's chest, before pulling back up again. In his massive fingers, he held a small light, one that somehow burned brighter than any other star in the sky despite being so tiny compared to everything else around it. As the sky and the Watcher slowly faded away, everyone heard a sound, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was deep yet soft at the same time, powerful but gentle too. An infinite voice, spoken directly into their souls. Rest, dream of paradise. And no peace at last. My beloved child. With that final word spoken, the sun returned to its rightful place in the sky. And there was only silence afterward as everyone processed what just happened here today. Some were still crying, while others simply stared dumbfounded up towards where the Watcher had appeared earlier, Gat's thugs only seeing a broken and despairing crowd of people. I kept a metaphorical eye on what they were doing as I reveled in my newly boosted DP production, 12 whole points per minute now. Although DP 253. That was expensive, so very, very expensive. First, blessing Ayamu's body so it wouldn't go into shock or die before I got my speech out, then keeping my voice strong and loud so everyone can hear me clearly, then casting a compulsion on Gat, then hiding everything from the thugs, then casting an illusion for everyone else. Yeah, that drained my DP dry. But after today's little event, I have more than enough faithful followers who will donate regularly from now on, thanks to seeing something like this happen right in front of them firsthand. And I already prepared 4 successors ready to take over everything once I was gone too. I checked in on everyone again. Haruka was crying silently along with many others who had known Ayamu personally during these last few months since he arrived here. Kenji stood still, tears streaming down his face, but otherwise not moving much either. Kazuo and Hikari were watching from afar, but both wore somber expressions upon their faces, even though they hadn't known him long before this incident happened earlier today. But being some of my most faithful believers, I could feel the determination and even happiness at Ayamu achieving his goal of waking up the Watcher. I can confidently say, my religion is secured. Creator's thoughts. 4/4, last of my stockpile, don't worry though, I'll try to write more chapters fast. Chapter 5, Meeting of the Minds. Kazuo was sitting alone in his small home, going through all the scrolls Ayamu had given to them a couple of nights ago. All of which detailed everything Ayamu knew about the Watcher, information that he had collected during his travels around the world before settling down here in Wave Country for good. While reading through it all once more, Kazuo couldn't help but marvel at how thorough this boy truly was when gathering knowledge regarding this ancient entity known only as the Watcher. It wasn't just facts or stories written within these pages either, there were also detailed accounts of various rituals used by those who worshipped the Watcher long ago, prayers they would recite daily while offering sacrifices unto their god every day without fail. All things considered, he must have been quite diligent when researching such matters. And yet despite spending years doing so, Ayamu died far too soon. His mind drifted back towards yesterday, where he watched helplessly alongside everyone else present as Gat burned him alive right in front of them all. He couldn't do anything except watch on silently from afar while praying desperately inside his heart for some kind miracle to occur somehow. And then suddenly, the sky turned dark, day turning to night as the sun was devoured by a sea of stars. A familiar visage gazing down at Ayamu burning beneath it and gently plucking out his soul. He hoped Ayamu was happy, knowing that he had achieved his goal. Old man! A voice called out softly behind him, causing Kazuo to jump slightly before turning around quickly. Standing there in front of him stood Haruka looking visibly tired after everything that happened. Don't scare me like that. You'll give this old heart a shock. Ah! But you were the one who told us to be sneaky. She pouted cutely. Kazuo grumbled something under his breath about young people being cheeky these days. Haruka glanced at what he was reading before speaking again. Did you already go through all of it? Yes. He replied curtly without hesitation whatsoever. Do you think we can do it? Haruka asked hesitantly after another silent moment passed between. Kazuo paused briefly before nodding slowly. Yes, I believe so. She smiled brightly upon hearing those words from him, which caused Kazuo's lips to twitch upward slightly too. He thought this girl really was too easy, going from sad to happy within seconds, but a part of him hoped she never lost that spark of hers. After all, when things get tough later on down the line, that same spark might be what keeps everyone else going. Unlike the other three youngsters Ayamu chose, Kazuo knows that what Wave is going through right now is not the worst-case scenario. He remembers back then, during the Second Shinobi World War, countless dead bodies, most of them young, their corpses filling the air with a thick miasma of death and decay. The nightmares from back then still haunted him every night without fail, even now, after so many years had passed by since he left active duty as a medic nin. But thanks to his old age and lack of connections, he managed to avoid being labeled a missing nin when he chose to retire early. It took him quite some time before he finally settled down here in the Land of Waves, where he has lived ever since, trying to forget all about his past life as a shinobi serving the Bloody Mist. Kazuo didn't believe Ayamu's preaching at first. What did this boy know about suffering? About loss and pain and sorrow? To him, everything Ayamu said sounded like empty words from someone who never truly experienced any of those things firsthand. But, day by day, he kept seeing people around him getting better, finding solace in prayer, in hopes of something better after enduring another harsh day under Gat's tyranny. At some point along the way though, Kazuo found himself praying alongside everyone else too, not because he wanted anything specific out of it or expected miracles to happen simply by doing so, but rather just because it felt good, comforting almost. And then Ayamu decided to upend Kazuo's views of the world by summoning a god. Guess even an old dog like him can learn new tricks. Had. Who thought he of all people would become a priest? Before he could slip further into his thoughts, he was snapped back to reality when the sound of a thud coming from another room in the house caught his attention instead. He tensed up and slowly rose out of his seat before quietly making his way over towards where the noise had come from earlier, motioning to Haruka to be quiet. Upon entering one of the bedrooms, however, Hikari? He asked softly upon seeing her lying face down on the floor next to an open window. The girl groaned weakly as she tried to push herself back up onto her feet once more but failed miserably at doing so due to her being entangled in the window curtains. Hee. Could I get a bit of help here? She giggled awkwardly while glancing between him and Haruka nervously. Both Kazuo and Haruka sighed loudly before helping this foolish girl get untangled from everything around her. "Thank you," she muttered quietly after they were done with that task. Her cheeks flushed bright red with embarrassment over what just happened here today. "Why did you come through the window?" Kazuo questioned sternly without hesitation whatsoever as he stared intently at her still blushing face now. You said to be sneaky." Hikari mumbled under her breath while avoiding eye contact with him entirely during their conversation thus far. He sighed again, rubbing his temples tiredly as he tried to calm down some more. Was he the one in the wrong here? He couldn't tell any more. "You two are going to kill me one of these days." Kazuo muttered darkly to himself before speaking up again. "Just don't do anything else that will make me die early, please." After making sure Hikari wasn't injured anywhere besides her pride, they moved back into the living room where all three sat together comfortably once more. "So?" Hikari began slowly after taking a deep breath first. "Where's Kenji?" "He should be on his way soon enough," Kazuo replied. "Hopefully, he doesn't go overboard like you two." "Hey, you said, we can't afford any attention coming towards us, so be sneaky when we meet up from now on." "I just took your words seriously." Haruka pouted again. "That doesn't mean sneaking up on me like that. I meant that you should be careful about coming here," he exclaimed angrily. Kazuo took a deep breath, calming down slightly before continuing further, "And you? You broke into my home through an open window. I thought it would be safer if no one saw me coming in." She trailed off quietly. He needed to calm down, he was a doctor first, and he knew stress wasn't good for someone his age. Otherwise, he might really die early. Before Kazuo could say anything else though, a loud knock sounded throughout the entire house, causing everyone else present to jump. "Kazuo-senpai! I have arrived!" A young man yelled outside loudly before bursting through the front door without waiting for anyone inside to respond back at him. And thus, in his first genuine prayer since becoming a priest. "Dear Watcher above, please give this old man the patience to survive these fools." Rejected. "My DP is far too precious for my priest's antics." Sadly, the insane speed of 12 DP per minute slowed down soon after. Still, with the amount that's being generated right now, I could go back to what I had before in just a week or two. I wonder if I should guide my priests more directly? Nah, I'll let them figure out things themselves for now. I needed to know as soon as possible how much my intervention was necessary, and this was a good test to see if I chose correctly in picking them. In the meantime, I had another problem to deal with. Namely, a dead guy. One of my followers had imitated Ayamu's prayer and killed himself, hoping that the Watcher would accept his soul like he did with Ayamu. Honestly, it wasn't surprising, but I didn't think one of them would do it so fast. I wanted to boot into the Pure Land immediately, but I made the mistake of reviewing his memories first. A simple life, born in Wave, worked hard as a rice farmer, got married, had kids. Pretty normal up to that point, but then he got crippled by failing down a hillside, breaking his spine and losing sensation below the waist. The bones were too fragmented for any doctor to fix, even Kazuo couldn't heal him. He was unable to work anymore, his children died of disease within weeks of each other, and his wife disappeared, everybody assuming she ran away with some other man. But he knew her better than that, he knew exactly where she went, she loved her children dearly after all. He was too much of a coward to follow her, he wallowed in his misery for years, only living by the pity of others around him. My sermons as Ayamu gave him hope. He truly believed that the Watcher cared, that the Watcher would reward everyone's efforts eventually. But in the end, Ayamu's death confirmed that he didn't need to fear death, and so he committed ritual suicide. In my previous life, it would have been so easy to dismiss this man as just another case of someone being fucked over by random chance, but now? Now I could feel his despair, I felt how hopeless and miserable he was. And he only wanted an end to his suffering. I had a thought as I finished reviewing his memories. I don't want to be responsible for people like this. Because now it isn't easy to just shrug my shoulders and move on with things. Because I can empathize with people on a level that goes beyond words, because now I am a god. But that ship has sailed, I chose to give hope to these people, so now I have to keep my word. What is a god if he cannot save one soul? I gathered every scrap of DP left I still had after everything yesterday, 400 and some change, and shaped into a blessing. One that would help him find his way through the Pure Land. I weaved the blessing into his soul and sent him off towards the Pure Land, one final message carried by my blessing. Enjoy paradise with your family. Creator's thoughts. 5/4. I lied, I realized that auxiliary chapters don't count for word count, so hey, race another chapter, I guess. This really is the last one for today though, I quite literally don't have any more time. Chapter 6, Good Progress and the First Blessings. DP 2534. It has been 2 weeks since Ayamu's death. Things have progressed pretty quickly thanks to everyone's hard work. First off, Kenji has become a sort of spokesman for my religion, mostly thanks to his charisma and large social circle. Surprisingly, he was pretty good at the whole speech thing. Well, good is an understatement. He's great, better than Ayamu even. Sadly, he doesn't really have a big stage to work on, all preaching and praying sessions were forced underground by Gat's goons. Kazuo has become the main organizer of everything, keeping track of new believers and coordinating things with the others to make sure everything runs smoothly. Hikari is responsible for the cult's counter-espionage operations. Basically, she keeps her eye out for any suspicious people and makes sure the gatherings are kept safe from prying eyes. And finally, Haruka has been serving as their unofficial leader ever since Ayamu died. She was actually the most surprising one so far because despite her timid nature, she took command quite naturally during these last few weeks following Ayamu's death. Honestly, quite surprised about her and Kenji, I was expecting Haruka to be the main preacher. Kenji's purpose was actually to be a protector. When I had enough DP to bless him up the gills with physical enhancements, once I had a ninja to teach him anyways. Kazuo sadly was a Chunin-level shinobi who specialized in medical ninjutsu, and it has been like 25 years since he retired. I knew from reading his memories that while he was decent at medical ninjutsu, he could get beat up by most fresh genin due to not having trained in decades. Talking about shinobi, I finally know exactly where I am in relation to canon, thanks to some rumors Hikari managed to gather. Apparently, someone named Tajuna was building a bridge for Wave Country to connect to the mainland of the Land of Water. Sadly, Gat caught wind of this project and the bridge builder has disappeared somewhere. This pretty much confirmed I was on the cusp of the canon storyline of Naruto. Now, how would this affect me? Well, I was thinking about recruiting Zabuza, to be honest. He should arrive soon once Gat realizes that Tajuna went to Konohagakure for help. He was a powerful shinobi, I wouldn't mind giving up some DP for him. First things first, though, I needed to reward my priests. Kenji enthusiastically stood up from his seat as everyone else fell silent around him while they waited patiently for what he had to say next. One more thing. I have great news, Kenji said excitedly, without wasting another second before continuing further. Old man Genosuke is letting us use his abandoned wine cellar as a meeting place. Haruka nodded happily upon hearing those words from him, smiling widely before speaking up herself now. That's amazing. Now we have a safe location in every part of town. Kazuo grunted slightly, rubbing his chin thoughtfully before nodding slowly afterward as well. I'll go ahead and make sure it's secure, see if we can dig some escape tunnels. Hikari volunteered with a smile on her face as she looked at everyone gathered here today. Yes. That sounds like an excellent idea, Kazuo muttered, still deep in thought about something or another. All right then. Let's get to work. Kenji shouted joyfully while raising both arms high above his head triumphantly, which caused several others present to roll their eyes. Kenji ignored their reactions though, he was used to their lukewarm reactions, and they were used to his boundless energy. Before they could finish up the meeting, however, a voice suddenly called out from everywhere at once, causing them all to freeze instantly upon hearing it. A reward for the faithful. A blessing of awareness. A blessing of wisdom. The voice sounded just like it did when Ayamu died, soft but overwhelming, drowning everything else out. Everyone could hear it clearly, as if it was being spoken directly into their souls. The effects of the blessing were felt immediately, the tiredness that was common at the end of a long day disappeared, memories became sharper and easier to recall, thoughts flowed like water, unhindered by the limits of fatigue and time. Everyone stood silently for several seconds after that final word left their minds before finally moving again once more, glancing around uncertainly between each other now before slowly returning to reality itself once more. Well. Haruka murmured quietly, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke up louder, I think we can all agree that. That was. The Watcher. Kenji finished for her instead. The Watcher. He shouted again excitedly while turning to look at everyone gathered around him. His eyes gleamed brightly with unshed tears brimming within them. We have been blessed. Calm down. Kazuo said sternly towards him as he quickly returned to his usual self. If anyone noticed his trembling hand, nobody said anything. Well, I guess this meeting is not over yet. DP 2193. Hope they were happy with those blessings. Thankfully, since they were my worshippers, it gave me a good discount. Only cost me a bit less than 400 DP in total. The blessing itself was simple, it removed tiredness up to a certain point and cleared up their thought processes, it also sharpened their memories quite a bit, not perfect recall or anything, but I hoped it would help them a bit. I also figured out why Gat was so hard to convince when I used the compulsions on him. Apparently, the more someone believes in me, the easier it is to use DP on them. The inverse also applies, meaning if someone does not believe at all, it will be much harder to affect them using DP. This applies even more if someone opposes me or actively dislikes me. As an example, someone who simply doesn't care about me would need about double the DP for most of my effects compared to a regular believer, while someone who dislikes me would require almost triple the DP. In Gat's case, he thought Amo was full of shit, but he also hated me for messing with his authority, so it required a lot of DP to get him to act like I wanted. There was some third variable that affected how effective my abilities were when targeting someone, but I didn't know what it was yet. It could be emotions, mental strength, or a bunch of other things. Hopefully, I will find out soon enough. Now to go on to something vital to my future plans. What holy animal am I going to choose? I had big plans for the future. Eventually I wanted to create my own angels. It would also be nice to have divine messengers that I could use, so I didn't have to spend DP on illusions or compulsions when I wanted to convey something. But, before all of that, I needed to figure out what animals I was going to use. Technically, I didn't have to use animals, but I wanted something familiar. I feel like it would be bad for my religion if I freaked everyone with eldritch tentacle monsters from beyond the void. Maybe crows? Or cats? Wait, no, weren't those associated with the Uchiha? I remember some vague memories of Sasuke fighting a big ninja cat. Were those summons or just shinobi cats like the Inyazuka dogs? Should I waste my precious DP on retrieving my vague memories before I turned into a god? That's probably the dumbest thing I could spend DP on. Fuck it. Crows. They're pretty common everywhere, so they won't stand out too much, and crow monsters are peak design when I eventually made combat crows. Actually, now that I think about it, I could outfit my combat people with crow cloaks or something, that sounds badass. But first, I need to check if there is a summoning clan for crows, would save me a lot of DP in the long term if I had something to work with. I gathered my DP and weaved together a simple spell. Blessing? Ability? To find out if there were any crow summons around. DP 2019. Ouch, expensive, but worth it, right? It succeeded, so I know a clan exists. Well, now to do it again to get a location, I used some DP to create a map of the elemental nations in my divine realm. DP 2018.4. Wait, why was that so cheap? I knew for sure from my time with Amo that creating a single blade of grass costed like 1 DP. Maybe because I have more control over this realm because it's mine? Good enough reason, I guess. That's good. Eventually I did want to turn this into a sort of afterlife for my best followers. No way was I letting my best and brightest bum around in the Pure Land for eternity. Right, focus. I can think about that later. Go Magic Crow Finder. A small black dot appeared on the map right outside the Land of Iron, far to the northwest. Welp. Time to take a trip. Thankfully, making a crow body with the ability to speak was much cheaper than making a human. Unseen by anyone, a completely normal crow appeared above Kazuo's home, and my new body took off in the direction of the crow summons. I hope they're willing to talk, if not, well, I can make my own, cooler, crows anyway. Chapter 7, Involving Myself with a Murder. Gat paced back and forth within his spacious office angrily while thinking hard about everything that had happened recently. Was it too much to ask for these people to understand that what they were doing was useless? A waste of time? First that Kaiza or whatever his name was, he thought after killing him the peasants would get scared enough to stop. But instead, they decided that listening to a random preacher was a good idea. Gat hated preachers and priests, nothing but con men with fancy words. What a load of shit. Sadly, he also knew that the peasants loved being told what to think, so he didn't want to kill him like that first fool, so he decided to give him a chance. It all ended up as a big mistake though. He made the mistake of thinking that boy was just another charlatan like most others he had dealt with over the years. But no, this one was worse. Instead of being a con man, he actually believed his own bullshit. He was planning to take the boy away and hire an impersonator or something along those lines, but then, when they captured him, Gat got pissed off. The nerve of that kid. Acting like he was something special just because he could convince a bunch of stupid peasants to follow him around like some kind of holy saint. Thankfully, his lapse of judgment didn't really matter much in the long run. His grunts told him everyone was quite crushed by the boy dying, and he heard of no one taking over or widespread anger yet. But then, as if taunting him, some random bridge builder tried to build a fucking bridge, so these worthless people could leave Wave Country. How dare that fucker try to mess with his business? So, he sent some men to break both of the bastard's legs, but the idiot was already gone. He got lucky that the old fuck was dumb as a brick, and one of his contacts found him going in the direction of Kanahagakur. Now he was waiting on his most trusted employees to return with news about a big shot missing nin in Water Country. A man called Mamakai Zabuza. Gat-sama. Gat glanced at the door where his secretary stood silently before waving him inside impatiently. What? He snapped irritably towards him while continuing to pace around angrily. The secretary swallowed nervously before speaking. Sir. Waraji has returned with Zabuza, sir. But. Zabuza brought 3 additional people. Gat paused briefly and smiled widely. Good. I will be down shortly. 3 more people? That was great. It's not like he was planning on paying them anyways. Being a crow is surprisingly fun. While I technically got a crow's view from the sky whenever I wanted, it just isn't the same as actually being in the air. The wind rushing past my feathers, the feeling of soaring high above everything else on earth. I think I'll keep this body permanently, for those times when I need a break from watching over my followers. Also, did you know the world was big? Shocking stuff, I was learning much while flying from Wave to the Land of Iron. Honestly though, I thought it would be like, a few hours tops. It took 2 days straight of non-stop flight to get here, and I'm only this far thanks to cheating, don't need to stop to eat or drink if I just used DP. Met, no point complaining, I have reached my destination. Now, let's see what we're dealing with here. My soul grows weary of your insults. A voice shouted in outrage. Do you not understand the pain my heart feels for having lost the love of my life? You fool, I will paint the leaves red with your blood. Another voice answered just as loudly. The darkness within me is strong and nothing can sate it. Shut up. You don't even know what real suffering is. A third one called out angrily before continuing further. You have never tasted the saltiness of despair. What the fuck was this shit? I stood silently on a branch near the voices, taking in the scene below me. A large open courtyard sat next to a pond, overgrown with weeds and other wild plants growing all over its surface. There were dozens upon dozens of gravestones surrounding the entire area around it too, each one seemingly placed randomly throughout without any rhyme or reason behind their placement. Upon the porch overlooking the gravesite stood 3 crows. All bigger than what I expected crows could get, in fact, they were fucking massive. I arrived here an hour ago, and they have been yelling at each other since then, for some reason. But why? Miscreant, you dare question my anguish? The crow on the right spoke again after hearing those words coming out of his companion's beak. Your eyes shall see true torment today. Why the fuck are they so edgy? Why did they speak like that? The only thing my eyes will witness is your head being severed from your shoulders. The crow on the left answered back with a snarl of rage. I really hope the rest of them are more normal because if not, I think I made a mistake choosing crows as my holy animal. I'd rather spend 1,000 years trying to make eldritch horrors cute before I ever go full my dark soul will crush all those who oppose me as my main theme. I was tempted to let them continue whatever this shit was but decided against it for now. I wanted to be done with this business sooner rather than later. I let out a caw above them, loud enough that it could be heard even over their shouting. The effect was instant, they all fell silent immediately upon hearing my voice call out from above them. Each looked up at me, clearly startled. TCH, a lowly bird dares interrupt our confrontation. The crow in the middle spoke up angrily while glaring daggers at me. Hat, truly a fool you are. The one on the right scoffed dismissively as well. It lacks chakra, I can feel its emptiness. Fucking end me. Every word they said made me want to slam my face into a tree and go back to watching over my followers instead of this, whatever this is. Silence. I said simply, trying not to show how much I disliked them on my face. Upon hearing me speak, all three of them stiffened. I wish to see your leader. I asked coldly. Who are you to demand the location of Sage Mikuro? The middle crow hissed out furiously before continuing further. Do you think just because you can hide your chakra that you are worthy to stand before him? Yes. It seems these crows were unused to someone not entertaining their nonsense. They all stared at me silently for several seconds before one of them spoke up again. Impudent whelp. We should pluck its feathers off one by one. Indeed. Its existence itself is an insult to our tribe. You should let your leader do that, since it's such a big insult. He would probably make quick work of me. I replied, not letting myself give in to temptation, and spent my precious DP to have a tree fall on them or something along those lines. Also, Sage Mikuro? That at least was good news. Sage meant senjutsu. That will be useful for my plans down the line. Foolish creature. One crow shouted indignantly towards me while spreading its wings wide open. Do not presume to know what our Lord would do. The ignorant must die for their ignorance. Another crow added menacingly. Enough. A raspy female voice came from above us, causing all three crows to freeze mid-step as they prepared themselves for flight. A massive crow fell from the sky above them, landing atop one of the larger gravestones nearby before glaring down upon everyone present here today with cold eyes. Its feathers were a faded grey and it towered over the other three crows, even though they were already huge. You three have displeased me. She said quietly, which considering how big she was, wasn't that quiet. Do not presume to decide who can meet Sage Mikuro. Apologies, Karasuheim. The middle crow bowed deeply before speaking again quickly. This ignorant whelp insulted us greatly with its arrogance. Oh, a princess. That's a step up from these edgelords. Hopefully, she is normal. I care not about your squabbles, nor do I care for any insults spoken by an outsider. You three should know better. She rebuked sternly. All three lowered their heads shamefully upon hearing her words. Now, go make yourselves useful somewhere else until I call upon you once more. They all nodded obediently as they took off into the sky. After they had gone far enough away from us, the princess turned back towards me again before speaking. You wish to meet our sage? Her voice sounded tired. Well, tired is definitely something you would feel if you had to deal with those idiots all the time. Yes. Then follow, his words are available for all who seek them. Good enough for me. I flew alongside the princess as she led me further into the forest. After flying deeper into the woods for about 10 minutes, we finally reached what seemed like an abandoned temple surrounded by tall trees whose branches almost completely blocked out the sunlight above us. Welcome to our home. She said softly as she landed gracefully atop one of the many statues scattered around outside. This is where Sage Mikuro lives. Yes. Karasu gestured with her wing. Simply go in. I nodded and flew inside the temple, finding it quite spacious despite its run-down appearance from the outside. There were countless statues within the main hall alone, each lifelike, all of them depicting various crow-like humanoids in different poses. Oh. I almost forgot, if you fail to learn senjutsu you turn into stone, these must be the failed ones. Eventually, I arrived at a large, mostly empty room. Well, besides the single tree in the center, anyway. A single crow sat atop a branch on top of the tree, meditating quietly. It was by far the biggest crow I had seen so far, about twice as big as Princess Karasu. He looked ancient, his feathers were all white with some faded black spots here and there. If I wasn't an actual god, I'd be intimidated by him. Greetings, sage. I said respectfully, no need to be rude after all. A puppet, He mused curiously. No chakra at all. Impossible for any living being. Well, he isn't wrong. Of a kind, I wished to recruit your clan. He paused momentarily before speaking once more. Interesting. We have decided quite a while ago to live without interacting with humans or ninja. That was actually pretty understandable. If I didn't know about the clusterfuck that was the future, I might have just done the same. But, well. Why? We are weary of human affairs, he replied. I saw much bloodshed with little gain. In my youth, I and some others left our former home to search for a simpler life. The main clan was massacred by a rival summoning contract years later. Even while speaking about such a heavy topic, his voice remained calm and level. Time and time again, history has shown us that living away from conflict is the best path for our kind. So you have nothing you want? Nothing that would be worth allying yourself with me? I asked. His gaze intensified slightly at those words before he continued further. Can you offer safety? Protection from wounds and disease? Can you promise peace, where death will not find us? I could hear the slight hint of mocking in his tone, which fair enough. It was clear that these guys had their own thing going on, and it was working pretty well for them too. But at the same time, yeah? I can totally give them that, maybe not immediately, but eventually, I could drag them to my divine realm, that was the plan anyways. Yes. He chuckled darkly upon hearing my answer. Very well, I will humor you. He waved his wing and with a puff of smoke, a massive scroll appeared. You will sign the contract with your blood, not this puppet's. He threw the scroll towards me with a quick flap of his wings, and it landed smoothly on the ground next to my feet, now open. Once you sign it, you have a season to fulfill your promise of safety. Otherwise, I will tear apart your flesh until nothing remains. Okay, a bit extreme, but I can respect it, he is giving me a choice, after all. Before I continued, I quickly fixed the whole ball of energy thing that was my godly form. Thankfully it didn't cost anything, I would have to run some tests later to see if I could freely shapeshift without using DP. The form I chose was a slightly altered version of what I made my followers see in the sky after Ayamo's death, male form, body made of stars and darkness, 3 eyes, 1 vertical in the middle of the forehead, 2 horizontal where human eyes should be. I felt more natural in this form compared to being a ball of energy. Was that because I used to have a human form before, or was it because my followers thought I looked like this? Either way, I didn't mind. I needed to use a physical body sooner or later anyway. Back with my crow body, I prepared myself for some theatrics as I burned through my remaining DP to open a rift between the mortal realm and my divine realm, revealing an endless void, empty sense my divine self floating above it all. I reached out with my arm, hand positioned above the open scroll. With a simple thought, black liquid gathered on the tip of one of my fingers, dripping down onto the paper below. The bargain is struck. The moment those words rang out from my lips, the liquid on the paper seeped into the contract, forming ever-shifting letters and symbols, completely overriding whatever was there before. A pact has been formed. My realm will be your home. Disease will not touch your people. Wounds of mind and body will be healed. Death will not reach you. You will serve as my messengers and swords. The rift slammed shut, cutting off the connection to the mortal realm, leaving nothing behind besides a completely normal crow standing next to a new contract. The sage stared uncomprehendingly at where the portal once stood. I waited for several minutes, but he did not move or speak. Was he even breathing? I think I'm going to leave now. Can't really wait around here forever. Gather your people and belongings, I will return in a month. He still didn't react. He heard me, good enough. With that, I left him alone and flew back towards Wave, satisfied with how everything turned out. Creator's thoughts. Man, I didn't realize how addicting it would be seeing people's comments. Every time I see that notification that someone commented or that they added my story to their collections, I get really happy. Chapter 8, War Footing. DP 1.8. There goes all my DP. If you're wondering, I spent it on overhauling my divine realm. After all, I did promise them safety in a home. I can't bring them into an empty void of nothingness, so I needed to fix it up a bit. It took a couple of weeks, my DP production was booming, and it was very cheap to create stuff in my own realm, but since I wanted to house a whole summon clan's worth of crows, I had to spend a lot to make it livable. Firstly, the main thing that was missing was actual land. An endless void isn't exactly good for living. So, with my amazing deductive skills, I deduced that crows like trees. And so, I added a bunch of trees. After some thought, I made them bigger than normal, bigger crows, bigger trees. It's not a forest though, more like a mildly dense collection of trees, no undergrowth either. It's similar to how real forests are in their early stages, according to my memories from my past life, anyway. The trees and grass were real though. I asked my worshippers to sacrifice some seeds, bark, leaves, and other things from different plants. The reason was simple enough, creating something with chakra was expensive, so, if I used something already made by the world, it was cheaper. So now I had a reasonably sized island with enough vegetation to feed an entire summoning contract's worth of crows. My realm still lacks some features though, like weather patterns or a sun. I can prevent any issues from not having those things with enough DP, but eventually, I'd like to add them in. On other news, Zabuza showed up. He actually arrived when I was out recruiting my new minions. I saw him in Gat's compound while scouting around with my crow body. He was just chilling, sharpening his sword. He looked exactly like how he did in canon, missing eyebrows and all. The scary part was that he actually glared at me and hit my crow body with a blast of killing intent when he noticed me peeping on him. Did he notice that I was spying? Maybe he really hates crows. For now, I'll save my DP. I wanted my people to be the ones to overthrow Gat. It would be an excellent way to rally everyone together for our new cause, but for that, I need Zabuza gone or recruited. He could slaughter every single person in Wave if you gave him a few months. The main thing that would have slowed him down was the need for sleep. Speaking of, using a bit of DP before I did the remodeling, let me see Tajuna's location. He is currently in Konoha. I didn't spend enough DP to actually see him, but this was good enough. From my followers' memories I knew that it took about a week of walking to get to Konoha from Wave. Has he been waiting in Konoha for a week? Or did he just take the safe route by not going in a straight line? Oh well, more time is good for me, so I won't complain. Assuming he was at the gate ready to head out by now, it would take him another week to come back. That gives me a maximum of 2 weeks to overthrow Gat. Although I really don't know if I wanted to gamble that the first fight would turn out the same as it did in canon. Kakashi could just kill Zabuza, or maybe Naruto would get sliced in half for interfering. 1 week then. 1 week to remove Zabuza, whether it be through death or recruitment. First off, let warn my followers that violence and fighting are going to happen soon. The priests of the Watcher were gathered inside the wine cellar hideout, the largest one they had yet, chanting softly while kneeling on the cold stone floor. Their voices echoed quietly throughout the empty room until they slowly faded away into nothingness as everyone finished their prayers simultaneously. All of them remained silent for several seconds afterward before finally rising back up again once more. They glanced around at each other momentarily before turning towards Kazuo expectantly as he stepped forward. All right, so, first things first. He began speaking calmly without any hesitation whatsoever. Kenji, how many followers do we have now? I think we are nearing 600. He replied confidently after thinking about it briefly. Kazuo nodded approvingly upon hearing those words. While he thought that boy was overenthusiastic sometimes, he couldn't deny how well Kenji handled recruiting new members and spreading the word around Wave. Hikari raised her hand slightly to get their attention. While that is great news, I have a concern. I heard some worrying rumors coming from Gat's men. Something about him hiring a big shot missing nin. Everyone in the room tensed up upon hearing this news. It could just be rumors, though. Hikari quickly added upon seeing everyone's reactions. We need to stop everything then. Kazuo said sternly while crossing his arms across his chest. I don't think that's necessary. Kenji argued loudly with a frown plastered across his face. I'm sure things will turn out fine. Listen, if there really is some powerful rogue shinobi around here. Kazuo started before pausing for a moment. Then the moment we get found out we are dead, a shinobi can easily slaughter all of us. I'm sure Kenji started again but got cut off by Kazuo instead. No. We are not taking any chances with something like this. He snapped angrily towards him. I said we're stopping our activities until further notice. Kenji gritted his teeth and clenched his fists tightly but didn't say anything else. Everyone could see that Kazuo was shaken by the news, and he had already told them about his past. None of them ever met a shinobi before, so they couldn't understand Kazuo's fear. But he understood the horrors a shinobi could unleash. A single Chunin-level shinobi could dismantle a small platoon of men easily enough. He did so regularly when he was young. What could a big shot missing nin do? Zabuza will not be a problem. A voice suddenly called out from above them. Everyone tensed up instantly, their blessed minds working overtime as they looked upwards. Perching on a rafter beam stood a crow. The quickest to respond was Haruka, who immediately politely bowed towards the bird. Greetings, stranger. She spoke softly and respectfully while keeping eye contact with it. Who might you be? The crow stared at her unblinkingly. It felt unnerving to have its attention focused solely upon one person like that. I come from behind the stars, it replied calmly before continuing further. With a message for the Watcher's most faithful. Everyone's enhanced mind worked through what it said and quickly reached the same conclusion. All of them kneeled immediately with their heads lowered reverently, their hands clasped together tightly as they offered up prayers silently in their minds. Well, except one. Kenji was as energetic as always. Greeting Great Crow. Praise the Watcher. He shouted enthusiastically while kneeling alongside everyone else. Rise, the crow commanded gently. There is much work ahead of you, and little time. Everyone rose quickly, Haruka taking point once again. What message do you carry from the beyond? She asked carefully while stepping forward slightly. Ayamu did write in his scriptures about divine messengers, but she wasn't expecting it to be a crow. Was that one of the things that was lost to time? The foolish bridge builder has escalated things greatly. It started slowly before pausing briefly. He seeks aid from outside forces. Gad has hired a powerful rogue shinobi named Zabuza Momokai to deal with him, along with the help he brings from Konoha. The crow flapped its wings once before landing atop the small altar they had built inside this hideout. Organize the faithful. Be ready for violence. Arm yourselves with what weapons you can find. Its voice became harsher as it continued speaking further. I will make sure that Zabuza will not be a problem, but Gad is yours to deal with. Spread the word, the crow commanded once more. In a week, Gad's reign will end. And just like that, the bird vanished into thin air without a trace left behind. Everyone stared silently at where it disappeared, their thoughts racing furiously throughout their enhanced minds until finally. Well, you heard the bird. Hikari shouted enthusiastically while breaking the silence. Let's get moving. Haruka quickly followed her lead, taking control of things immediately afterward. Kenji, talk to our followers and convince them. Kazuo, we need weapons, see if you can get your hands on crossbows and spears, she instructed sternly. Hikari, keep an eye on Gad's men. Use everything you can, one way or another, by next week we won't have to worry about them anymore. Everyone nodded resolutely before quickly getting to work. That went well. I'm realizing now how annoyed I am at Tajuna. Sure, he probably didn't have any idea of my plans, but he is making me gamble with 0 DP in the bank. Oh well, I will wait until tomorrow just so I have a bit of DP in the bank. One day should give me enough to at the very least cast some illusions to convince him if he proves to be unreasonable. Hopefully, my followers are enough for this, discounting those too young or not healthy enough to fight. I estimate about 350 people who can use a spear decently. Now, to find Zabuza. Chapter 9, Negotiations with a Demon Swordsman. Thankfully, he was still chilling at Gad's compound. Doing something, sharpening his sword again maybe? No matter. Time for diplomacy. I flew down in my crow body, aiming for the window. He noticed me the moment I got within a few hundred feet of him. Damn, shinobi are scary. I perched myself on the windowsill, and stared at them. Haku was also there, standing silently with his back against the wall. I didn't see the demon brothers, though. Did he already send them ahead to scout out Tajuna? I checked my DP just in case before I started talking. DP 332. Alright, enough for a big illusion if needed. Here we go. Zabuza carefully watched the crow that perched itself outside his window. He made sure to position his body so he could easily draw his Kyubikaribch in an instant if it tried anything funny. He noticed Haku shifting into a better position from the corner of his eye. Good lad. It's the same one that was stalking around earlier, he said casually. What do you think? A summon. Haku answered hesitantly. Zabuza didn't think so, he had never heard of a crow clan before, and this thing didn't react at all to his aura, not even a single twitch, so neither a normal animal and unlikely to be a summon. Maybe some random shinobi's pet? Could be. Should we kill it? Haku asked quietly. Zabuza frowned slightly upon hearing those words. He could hear the hesitation in the boy's voice. Still too soft. No, if it belongs to a shinobi, killing it would alert them. If it were smart, it wouldn't have gotten this close again. Zabuza replied while eyeing the bird carefully. It was still staring at him with its beady little eyes. Well reasoned. The crow suddenly spoke up calmly. But wrong. Zabuza wasted no time, his hand flashed towards his Kyubikaribch, drawing it in a single smooth motion, swinging it towards the bird with enough force to cut through steel. His sword stopped short right before it could reach the bird, the edge of the blade touching its feathers. Who sent you? He asked coldly, his grip remaining steady despite how heavy his weapon was. My patron wishes to offer you employment. Oh? Now that was interesting. Zabuza had been approached by many people over the years trying to recruit him for various reasons, but this one took the cake in weirdness. "And what does your patron want from me?" he asked simply, without letting his curiosity leak into his voice. "For you to not protect Gat for the next week," the crow answered. "Afterwards, my patron wishes for you to teach." Someone was going to attack Gat? Well, it wasn't too surprising. Zabuza had spent less than a couple of hours in the same room as him, and he already knew he was a disgusting weasel who deserves to get shanked in an alleyway. But going against his client like that? Even though he didn't have any respect for the man, he did have a reputation to maintain. This better be worth it. Missing nin that turn their back on clients don't last long, he said slowly. The assignment would be long-term, years at the least, the crow replied matter-of-factly. My patron wants someone to teach his followers how to fight effectively. Zabuza hummed slightly while thinking things through. How many people, and what's the pay? Around 24 at first, the number will increase later as more are recruited. What would you wish to be paid with? Strength? Protection? RY? Zabuza frowned slightly. One of those then? This patron was either some powerful shinobi from one of the major nations, or a scammer. He glanced sideways towards Haku before looking back at the bird. Strength? Haku blinked in confusion upon hearing that, but he quickly caught on. Zabuza wanted to test whoever this patron was. You will have to meet my patron then, in person. Zabuza felt a shift in the air, the crow's eyes still stared into him, unmoving. Are you sure? It asked, tone unchanged since the beginning of the conversation. You might not like what you see. Well, that was ominous, but Zabuza knew himself to be quite adaptable. As long as this patron wasn't S-rank in power, he could handle it. I'm sure. With that, the crow's eyes began leaking black liquid. Zabuza tensed up, raising his blade towards it once more. But the bird didn't react to his movements at all, and as more and more of the liquid leaked out, it began dripping from its beak and body onto the windowsill, the liquid flowing up the walls and ceiling of Zabuza's room. Soon, everything around them became pitch black with the same strange fluid. Then, countless stars blinked into existence all around him, twinkling gently in an endless sea of darkness. Zabuza looked down at the ground below, finding nothing but an abyss beneath his feet, stretching forever downward without end. He gathered his chakra and pulsed it, trying to dispel genjutsu, only for nothing to happen. Kai! He shouted loudly before sending another pulse of chakra throughout his body. No effect. He gritted his teeth slightly while taking a defensive stance. He glanced towards Haku, who seemed to be in the same situation as him. He was glancing around nervously at their surroundings before his gaze met Zabuza's own. Haku tensed up even further after seeing what must have been a rare look of unease on Zabuza's face. He had never seen someone cast genjutsu that could resist being broken by him. A weird pressure washed over both of them suddenly, their instincts screaming at them to flee, but there was nowhere to go. They were trapped. Something moved in the darkness ahead, behind the stars. Something massive, easily dwarfing anything either of them had ever seen before. Zabuza's breath caught within his lungs as he tried to withstand the pressure. This was worse than the fourth Mizu cage, far worse. Eyes appeared from the darkness, 3 orbs of gold stared down at him with incomprehensible emotions gleaming within their depths. A bargain? The voice was overwhelming, it drowned out everything else in existence, as if it spoke directly into his soul itself. He swallowed thickly before trying to force words past his lips. Why yes. Zabuza was not a weak man, far from it. He had done horrible things to people for little more than money. He didn't mind doing things that would turn a regular person's stomach, he enjoyed killing people. But, whatever this thing was, it was on a scale beyond anything he had ever encountered before. The sheer pressure emanating from it made him feel like an ant in comparison. Even the Sanbai paled in comparison. It is struck. Serve well. The eyes vanished, the stars fading away along with them until nothing remained except for absolute darkness. And it rushed back inwards again. The endless void retreated into that fucking bird, leaving behind no trace of its presence once more. Zabuza stood silently in his room, sword raised defensively still. He looked sideways towards Haku, who was shaking slightly. You were warned. The crow finally spoke up again after several seconds of silence, breaking them out of their daze. After Gat is dealt with, a messenger will seek you out. With that, it flew out of the window and disappeared into the night sky above. What was that? Haku whispered softly once they were alone, his voice barely audible even within the quietness surrounding them both. I don't know. Zabuza answered honestly while lowering his weapon slowly before sheathing it again, the memory of those golden eyes burning themselves into his mind forevermore. He was never one for religion, but if someone asked him to describe what a god would look like, he would tell them to fuck off. But if pressed further, his description would probably match what he saw just now. Call back the demon brothers, tell them to lay low, he commanded sternly after taking a deep breath to compose himself better. If this thing is an enemy to get, then we do nothing to help him. Haku nodded hastily before leaving the room quickly without another word. Good lad. Zabuza looked out the window, where the crow had flown off into the distance mere moments ago. A part of him wondered why such a powerful being would go through all this trouble. He couldn't comprehend why it didn't just kill Gat itself. It's not like he was anything to that thing. Maybe it wanted to test its followers? He shoved his curiosity aside. He felt like he had gotten involved in something way beyond his understanding. Hopefully, this didn't come back to bite him later down the line. DP 52. And there goes almost all of my DP, again. I wonder if it will always be like this. For every one problem I solve, another rears its ugly head. I should have waited on the whole recruiting the crows thing until after Gat was dealt with. Oh well, it's not like I could predict the future, if only the original series had dates and times for everything, but no, everything was super vague. 1 month later isn't exactly helpful, you know? Thankfully, I now had a few days of DP production to save up for whatever this whole situation ends up costing me. I will have to keep some in reserve to pay Zabuza. I was surprised he chose strength, but it was actually better for me. It's not like I had any money anyway. But for now I could relax. In a week, either my little cult would succeed in taking down Gat and gaining control of Wave, or they would fail and get slaughtered. Creator's thoughts. The frustration of Naruto lacking a detailed timeline is 100% from me. Also please give me more reviews. My story technically having 0 stars because there aren't enough reviews is shattering my heart. FR no cap. I'm liking this pace of writing, so I think I can officially say that 3k words, 1 big chapter or 2 smaller ones, per day will be the minimum for the foreseeable future. Might increase or decrease later though. Chapter 10, The End of a Wannabe Dictator. It was the night before the scheduled day for the uprising. All the priests of the Watcher were gathered up to discuss the push tomorrow. A large map of Wave was laid out across the floor with several points marked down on it where groups of people would be stationed during tomorrow's fight. Gat? Kazuo asked while glancing at Hikari from across the table. They were seated inside one of their many hideouts scattered throughout Wave. This one was particularly deep within the forest near the outskirts of town. Yet, apparently he is hiring mercenaries. Hikari replied absent-mindedly while scanning through some reports she gathered about Gat's activities lately. When do they arrive? Kazuo leaned forward slightly over the wooden surface separating them both, his eyes narrowed sharply as he stared intently at her papers. In 5 days. She answered simply before looking back up towards him. Well, according to my sources. Kazuo grumbled something under his breath before leaning back and visibly relaxing himself once more. Good timing. Yes, we can strike tomorrow morning without worry, Kenji added cheerfully before continuing further. There is one issue though. Is it about the missing nin? Haruka asked curiously. Kenji nodded solemnly in response. Yet. One of the new followers that recently joined us lives pretty close to Gat's compound. He saw 2 men wearing masks and headbands enter into his compound yesterday. Everyone frowned at hearing this news. They couldn't afford any complications when trying to overthrow Gat. They were already pretty underprepared. If their target ended up being protected by shinobi, then everything will go wrong. The Great Crow promised Zabuza would be no problem. Kenji said hopefully. So maybe we don't need to worry. It doesn't matter, even if we call it off now, everyone is already committed. Kazuo argued back firmly before continuing further. We need to remove Gat and his influence from Wave completely so we can actually build a future here. You're right, also we shouldn't doubt the Watcher. If these unknown missing nin show up, I'm sure our divine patron has made arrangements. Haruka nodded resolutely. With that decided, they turned back towards the map with renewed determination as they began finalizing everything for tomorrow's attack. 300 people would be marching on Gat's compound, armed with 80 crossbows and bows. The rest had mostly spears and other improvised weapons such as maces or wooden shields. Only 80 of them were equipped with some form of armor, although it was mostly leather pads rather than actual metal plating. Hikari had managed to find some servants that worked at Gat's compound and convinced them to slip some medicine made by Kazuo into his thugs' food. So when morning comes around, they should be barely able to stand. Haruka had organized several smaller groups throughout the city to keep things in order and make sure there wasn't too much unrest or looting. Hopefully, everything will go smoothly enough that no one gets hurt during all this mess. Kenji was going to lead the main assault, alongside Kazuo. The latter will focus on healing the wounded while Kenji directed everyone else forwards towards their target. They talked long into the night, their blessing making sure their minds remained sharp. They worked out every detail they could think of, preparing themselves as best as possible for what might happen tomorrow morning. In a day, the cult of the Watcher would rid Wave of Gat once and for all. Kazuma considered himself a fairly straightforward person, he didn't care about complicated plans or big ideas. As long as there was someone who needed killing, he was happy doing it. That's why he was pretty happy with how things turned out lately. He and his brother got hired by this rich fucker named Gat for a simple job: protect the compound from anyone trying funny shit. Although now he was starting to regret taking the mission, not because it was hard or anything like that. No, it was simply so fucking boring. Especially since half the fucking idiots that were supposed to be protecting this place were sick now. He knew some of them wanted to go beat up the butcher for giving them spoiled meat or something along those lines. He was on board with that plan. Kazuma? His brother asked quietly beside him, pulling him away from his thoughts. Do you see that? He looked towards where he was pointing and blinked in surprise. There was a single man running down the street in their direction. He seemed panicked about something, waving one arm wildly while the other hung limply at his side. Isn't that Mitsuo? He mumbled curiously before focusing his gaze further ahead. What was that idiot doing? He didn't even have any weapons on him. Help! Help! The man yelled frantically as he ran closer towards them. They're attacking us. Oh? Kazuma felt his blood rush in anticipation. Finally, something interesting was happening around here. What's going on? Who is attacking? He shouted loudly over the noise coming from within Gat's compound. All of them. We need a ARG. A crossbow bolt suddenly buried itself in the man's back, sending him tumbling to the ground with a sickening crunch. Kazuma immediately ducked down low behind one of the walls surrounding Gat's compound while reaching for the weapon attached on his hip. He glanced over towards his brother, who was already armed with a spear and shield in each hand respectively. He peeked out again only to quickly jerk backwards as another bolt slammed into where his head used to be. He could hear footsteps rapidly approaching from outside now, along with more screams of alarm ringing out throughout the compound's grounds. There were at least 24 people coming this way, if not even more than that. He risked looking outside once more, just in time to see a horde of people charging straight towards them. What the actual fuck? Where did these guys come from? Some held bows while others wielded crossbows or spears. All were dressed differently too, none wore anything resembling proper armor either. Bar the gates! He yelled as loudly as he could. Don't get on the walls, they have ranged weapons. What shit timing for this fucking uprising? Kazuma had been looking forward to getting drunk off his ass tonight. Kenji was having the time of his life. He was feeling nervous earlier, but after catching a group of thugs unprepared and killing them all, well, it was like an addiction now. He wanted to do it again. The lingering fear of Gat's men nested deep within every Wave citizen made itself known. Many of Kenji's brothers and sisters in faith hesitated on the march towards their target, but as soon as one fell dead without even managing to get close, well, something snapped. They charged forwards eagerly now, some more enthusiastic than others. The moment some thugs were spotted, arrows and bolts started flying. Kenji was certain they hadn't missed a single shot yet. Truly amazing work from his fellow believers. Bring the ram! Kazuo shouted behind him. A massive log strapped to several wheels rolled up next to their position soon after that, the front of it carved into a crude crow head. Now one final push, maybe around 100 thugs remained inside the compound. They would die before the day ends, the Watcher demanded it. The ram was pulled back by a dozen people, each one the strongest they could find, and with a battle cry, they pushed it forwards as hard as they could. The sound of the wood slamming into the gate echoed loudly throughout the air, shaking the entire structure violently. Again! Kenji roared excitedly while pumping his fist high into the sky above him. Bring it down! No mercy! Another loud boom followed shortly afterward, quickly followed by another, and another. Kenji! This is going to take a while. Kazuo shouted at him again from somewhere nearby. They are barricading the gate with everything they have. That wasn't good, it gave them time to prepare and ready themselves for what would happen next. But if all else fails? Everyone! Pray with me! He called out towards everyone around him. Our patron is watching. O Watcher! You who observe beyond the stars! Kenji began loudly, everyone repeating after him. We pray to thee, so that our enemies may fall beneath your gaze, and their sins be witnessed by none other than you. Kenji didn't need to turn around to know everyone present was praying alongside him, he could feel the Watcher's attention on them. The ram continued its assault on the gate in rhythm with their prayer, each slam shaking the ground beneath their feet. Then suddenly, it stopped moving altogether mid-swing. Kenji felt something wet drip on his shoulder before glancing at where it fell from. Above, directly over the wall, was a massive, black, rift-like portal. Black liquid leaked out of it into the ground below. Before anyone could react, dozens of streaks of light shot out from within the portal. They struck at the walls of the compound like arrows fired from heaven itself, penetrating deep into the wood before exploding outward violently in all directions. Not a single piece of shrapnel touched any of the Watcher's followers, though, and when the dust settled, there was no longer a gate to speak of, or walls for that matter. Forward! Kenji shouted triumphantly as he ran through the new entrance alongside everyone else around him. Zabuza was watching everything from afar, hidden on the roof of the highest building nearby. He watched silently as this makeshift army broke into Gat's compound with ease, using some kind of strange power to bring down its outer defenses. Master Zabuza! Haku spoke up softly beside him. Should we leave? Zabuza narrowed his eyes thoughtfully before shaking his head slightly. No, I want to see how this plays out. While he knew an attack was coming, he didn't expect a literal army would show, and that power they used to bring down the walls. It felt similar to what he experienced in that void. He was thinking of helping if anything, at the very best, the thing he met in this small meteor shower was a trick played on him by another powerful shinobi. At worst, well, prepare yourself. Zabuza commanded firmly, not taking his gaze off the scene unfolding below them. If you see an opening, strike, he instructed sternly while slowly drawing his massive blade from behind him. Haku nodded resolutely next to him, silently preparing several needles between his fingers. Please don't! A familiar voice called out from behind them. Zabuza spun around instantly, Kubikaribbh swinging in a wide arc towards where it came from. Only to stop abruptly as he saw what was standing there. That damned crow again! He couldn't help but tense up slightly at the sight of it, memories from almost a week ago flashing through his mind briefly. You! The bird merely stared back unblinkingly at him. My patron wishes for you not to interfere unless absolutely necessary. Why? He asked curiously, lowering his weapon carefully until it rested against the roof beneath them once more. Gat and his forces have been casting a shadow over them for a long time, my patron believes they will be happier if they dealt with it themselves. The crow answered, without breaking eye contact with him. And I assume they wouldn't like me taking Gat's head either, then. Zabuza guessed calmly, already knowing the answer. Yes. The bird agreed. Gat will die by the hands of those he hurt. Do not worry, though. Your attempt at improving my patron's opinion of you is noted and appreciated, regardless of our request. It finished, before shifting its attention back towards the compound in front of them. Zabuza couldn't help but feel annoyed at those words. He was totally going to help to get into that thing's good side, but it was impolite to say it out loud like that. Whatever, he would get into the thing's good graces without moving a muscle, that wasn't so bad. Kazuo could safely say he was not having fun right now. This whole thing brought back unpleasant memories of the war, thankfully with less of his allies and friends dying around him, but it still felt uncomfortably familiar. To a suspicious degree, to be frank, while people have gotten wounded so far, none of them were life-threatening injuries. They had lost exactly 0 people on their side so far, meanwhile, they had killed dozens upon dozens of Gat's thugs. It seemed a bit too convenient, almost like they were being protected by a higher power. Praise the Watcher! He muttered softly under his breath as he bandaged another follower's leg. Praise the Watcher! Kazuo jumped as everyone around him echoed his words loudly and excitedly, even wounded they all pumped their fists into the air at those words. Kazuo couldn't help but shake his head in exasperation at their enthusiasm before continuing onward. Right, where was Kenji? He was supposed to keep him updated on what was happening. Oh, there he is. Kazuo. Good news. Kenji walked towards him while covered in blood, yet clearly unharmed. We have got cornered. Kazuo was worried about this boy. Out of everyone in his group, he didn't expect him to take violence so enthusiastically. But that wasn't what was important right now. What? Already? He asked quickly as he stood up from beside his patient's body. Where? Inside the main building. Kenji pointed towards the large structure situated directly ahead of them both. He barricaded himself inside. We are getting ready to bring it down. This was going faster than Kazuo expected. While he expected everything to go well thanks to the Watcher's blessing, he thought it would take a few days of fighting for Gat's men to finally give up. Not just a few hours. Before he could continue that train of thought, Kenji interrupted him by grabbing hold of his wrist tightly before dragging him forward excitedly. Come on! I want you to be there when we get our revenge! He shouted loudly over all the noise surrounding them as they made their way through the compound. Kazuo merely sighed deeply while letting himself be dragged along like some kind of ragdoll by Kenji's surprisingly strong grip. We found some explosives in Gat's armory, Your Holiness. One of Haruka's followers informed her politely as soon as she arrived at their location. We believe it's enough to blow open the door. Haruka nodded solemnly before turning around and addressing everyone present, all of them here to participate in this final battle against their oppressor. Make sure everyone is behind cover. Once we blow down these doors, we will end this nightmare once and for all. Several loud cheers answered her call as dozens upon dozens of people moved to obey her orders without hesitation or question. Soon after that, several men placed several blocks of clay-like material around the hinges of the reinforced steel doors, all of them connected via a single thin wire leading into one of the nearby buildings. Everyone clear! The man holding the wire shouted inside the doorway. Clear! Haruka replied loudly once everyone was accounted for. Do it! The man nodded once and went back inside, taking cover behind several layers of walls. A few seconds later, a spark traveled down the wire and caused all the explosives to go off simultaneously, creating a loud booming noise followed immediately by the sound of debris hitting every surface in sight. Forward! Haruka commanded loudly as soon as she saw smoke billowing out from within the building. She didn't need to say anything else because almost even before she spoke, dozens of people were already charging into the crumbling remains of what used to be Gat's personal office. She heard the twang of bows and crossbows firing from inside shortly after that. She followed closely behind alongside her personal guards, entering just in time to see 3 more bolts bury themselves into their target. Gat himself was currently cowering behind his desk, 4 of his men already dead around him. He was bleeding heavily from his forehead and covered in dust and dirt, probably due to the explosion. Haruka wasted no time walking up towards him, taking note of how he flinched violently at each step she took closer. She kneeled down in front of him so they could look each other straight in the eye. Gat trembled noticeably under her cold gaze as if trying desperately to avoid looking directly into her eyes but failing miserably. Please, please don't kill me! He begged weakly, tears streaming down his face freely now. I'll do anything you want me to. Just let me live. Haruka ignored his pleas entirely, turning to her followers instead. Go get some firewood, oil, and a big enough steak. Gat's face turned pale white at those words, realizing what she had planned for him. No! He cried out loudly as he tried scrambling backward, only to be stopped by one of Haruka's guards slamming a foot on his chest and keeping him pinned. Please! He continued begging, tears still running down his cheeks. I'll give you money. I have plenty of it. Name your price. Daigo, break his limbs. She ordered hatefully while standing back up. She watched dispassionately as her guards obeyed her command without hesitation. Finally, the wretched man got what was coming to him. She turned around and made her way outside, leaving behind Gat's pained screams. Sorry, Ayamu. I know you didn't want revenge. She thought sadly as she looked up towards the sky above them all. But this is for me. She might have imagined it, but she felt like someone acknowledged those words. Feeling just a bit better, she went to inform everyone about their victory. Creator's thoughts. Wow, I publish a chapter and go to bed and wake up to this story just exploding. I asked for reviews expecting maybe 1 or 2 and got 9 of them. This whole FIC on my side is just a content wow, can't believe so many people like it. On repeat every time I check the stats again. I think we are within 10 to 20 in every weekly list now. Also this is officially the end of the Gato arc. Next chapter Ninja Jesus and his friends arrive in wave with Tajuna. R11, a little bit of celebration and more ninja. The news spread fast, people almost ran to tell others that Gat was captured, most of the thugs he had were dead already and the rest ran far away from Wave after seeing what happened. Those too sick to fight either got arrested or killed if they resisted, a few managed to escape, but no one was too worried about it. By the time night arrived, the city was full. Haruka ordered Gat's burning to be held where Ayamu once preached and the place he burned. She figured it would be fitting. People gathered in a large circle around the area, none wanting to miss the event. Kazuo had healed every wounded follower he could, the mood was better than ever. People were laughing and drinking openly everywhere you looked. Many were disappointed that Gat was already unconscious when they staked him up, but even that got turned into insults and joke thrown at the man. Haruka waited until the majority of people settled down before speaking loudly enough for everyone present to hear her clearly. Brothers, sisters. Today we finally avenged our beloved high priest. She started shouting passionately over the cheers rising from everyone around them both. No longer will Wave suffer under this rat's oppression. More cheering answered her words as she paused briefly to allow it all to sink in properly. She then gestured towards the pitiful figure of Gat tied to a stake behind her before continuing once more. Behold your oppressor. Hung like any common thief. Her followers booed at him angrily, some even threw things at him such as rocks or rotten food. But he will not die nameless. He will not die unknown. Haruka shouted again after letting everyone get their feelings out. Everyone shall know of Gat and how he fell here today. Everyone shall know what happens to those who would dare harm the people of Wave. Another round of cheers erupted from all sides around them both, growing louder and louder until it seemed impossible for them to grow any further. With one final nod from her, two men stepped forward holding torches in their hands. They approached the piles of firewood carefully placed beneath where Gat stood bound before throwing them inside without hesitation or mercy. Almost instantly, flames began licking hungrily at everything nearby, as thick black smoke rose high into the air above everyone gathered there watching intently. Some laughed as others cried tears of joy while still, others watched silently, but no matter which reaction you saw amongst those present, there was undeniable satisfaction written across each face. Haruka turned away from it all soon afterward, though, even with anger at Gat still boiling inside her, she couldn't handle seeing someone burn like that again. She walked towards where Kazuo stood near Kenji and Hikari, watching as everything played out just like they had planned. When he noticed her approaching him, however, Kenji smiled brightly before walking over to meet her halfway through her journey towards him. He hugged her tightly once he reached close enough proximity between themselves. We did it. We actually did it. Haruka returned his embrace just as strongly, feeling tears welling up within her own eyes despite herself. Yes, we did. They made their way back to Kazuo and Hikari, who were now both looking rather happy too. Even if neither showed much emotion normally. She gave each of them quick hugs as well before stepping back slightly so she could address everyone. What happens next? Hikari asked curiously. Do we have a plan? Ah, who gives a shit? Kazuo suddenly blurted out. Kazuo. Haruka admonished him, but she couldn't hide the amusement in her voice either. Let's go get drunk, we can worry about the complicated stuff later. He finished with a small smirk on his lips. That's probably the best idea you've ever had, Kenji admitted after thinking about it briefly. I know of a tavern nearby. And that's what they did, celebrating together late into the night, while the corpse of Gat continued burning brightly until dawn. Tajuna was worried sick. He managed to convince Konoha to protect him, sure, 3 of them were brats, but he was assured the Cyclops-looking one was one of the strongest jonin around. Still, he rang the bell, his friend was supposed to be waiting with a boat for them to use, but he was nowhere to be found. Tajuna grew more and more worried by the second. Then finally, he heard something. It sounded like singing. Drunken singing at that. What in the world was going on? Hello? Is anyone there? He shouted towards the source of the noise. Zuna. Is it you? A man's voice called out drunkenly from the fog. Soon after that, a small boat rowed its way over to them, revealing several people. All of them drunk off their asses. What in the world? Kakashi muttered from behind him, sounding just as confused as Tajuna himself. Mr. Zuna. Good news. Gat is dead. The same man shouted loudly at him before stumbling backward into someone else sitting inside the boat with him. What? Tajuna asked wide-eyed. Dead. Yet. Burnt at the stack. Another man chimed in happily. Wave is free. Tajuna was speechless, he felt relief and happiness wash over him all at once. This couldn't be happening, could it? Did he just waste his money on hiring Konoha for nothing? No, that's not important right now. Oi! Are you a shinobi? A woman sitting next to the two men spoke up this time. Thank you for coming out here. But is no longer necessary. The bridge is safe. All of them erupted into cheers once again after hearing those words. The Konoha shinobi behind Tajuna were looking at each other confused. Who was Gat? Why was he burned at the stake? What even happened? Tajuna-san. Kakashi called out. What's going on? Tajuna's nervousness came back as he realized that maybe misleading Konoha might have been a terrible idea, but it didn't matter at the moment, his home was safe. DP 4132. There is nothing I love more than seeing a number go up, and it's even better when that number represents my literal divinity. Even with spending a good amount on the whole meteor shower thing and saving my followers from death in a few instances, I still managed to make a decent profit. Wave was safe, my religion was the one that dealt with Gat, and I was going to repress the memories of seeing Kenji gleefully slaughtering the non-believers and the memory of Haruka coldly ordering the burning of Gat. Where did the sweet woman that I met go? Was it my fault for getting close to her and then martyring Ayamu? Nah, couldn't be me. Now, how much can I afford to give Zabuza? Well, let's see, the mental blessing was out, I didn't want to make a potential enemy smarter, and until Zabuza believed in me or had something tying him to Wave, that is what he was. The physical blessing would be a waste for obvious reasons, anything that would be noticeable enough would cost too much. Chakra already made him strong enough to punch people through walls, anything more would require a pretty high price. Same for chakra-related blessings. I guess I could think on it a bit more, I still have time before I need to meet up with Zabuza again. Oh. Also, Team 7 arrived today. I would need to make sure they didn't fight with Zabuza. Actually it would probably be a good idea to not let them see anything about my actual strength, Denzo still existed, after all. The last thing I needed was that paranoid fuck targeting me because he somehow found out about my power. Honestly, Kakashi rated this as one of the weirdest missions he had ever taken. He had done many missions that went wrong over his career as a shinobi, he had done many missions that were boring or simply tedious. But this is the first time he had done a mission that went from potentially disastrous to entirely pointless in an instant. He didn't really care too much about getting paid, maybe this would be a lesson for his cute little genin. A lesson about how shitty clients can be, at least. So, what now? Sakura asked nervously from behind him while eyeing the clearly drunk people rowing their boat away from them. We should probably escort Tajuna-san back home at the very least, Kakashi mused aloud before glancing back at said man. If you wouldn't mind leading the way. Tajuna nodded hesitantly before walking away from the riverbank with all three of them following closely behind him. They made small talk on their way towards the bridge builder's house, mostly about Gat and who he was. Since the drunkards were half alcohol by volume at this point, they didn't give a lot of information. The short version was that he was some rich criminal that ran Wave like a mob boss would, stealing money, killing whoever disagreed with him, etc. Very depressing stuff, so pretty standard for what Kakashi had seen during his career. When they arrived at Tajuna's house, Kakashi noticed immediately that something was off. There were 4 people waiting outside for them, 2 men and 2 women. 3 of them were armed, while one was carrying a basket filled with bread. They smiled warmly upon seeing Tajuna approach, though their expressions quickly turned somewhat suspicious when they saw Team 7 standing there alongside him. Tajuna. Welcome back. The unarmed woman greeted happily as she put her basket down onto the ground next to herself before stepping forward to give him a big hug. Have you heard the news? She seemed completely oblivious to her companion's gazes lingering warily on Kakashi and his students, which wasn't too surprising considering how friendly she appeared to be overall. Yes. I heard. Tajuna replied after breaking away from the embrace awkwardly. He cleared his throat before speaking again. Ahem. These are Konoha shinobi, they came to protect me while building the bridge. The woman's eyes widened slightly at those words before turning towards them and bowing deeply. Thank you. For coming all this way for us. Kakashi could feel his cute little genin shifting uncomfortably behind him at hearing that. Ah, they were embarrassed. Please come inside, we have so much to talk about. She continued excitedly without waiting for anyone else to respond first. Well? Come on in. Tajuna grumbled softly under his breath as he moved past everyone. They followed suit soon afterward. Kakashi gave a nod to the 3 guards, who awkwardly stepped aside so they could enter the house. So, what exactly happened? Tajuna asked after everyone settled down inside his home, sitting around the dining room. The woman, who introduced herself as Tsunami, started telling a wild tale of a priest being burned at the stake, a cult uprising against Gat, and meteors falling from the sky. All of which sounded far-fetched if you weren't a shinobi. They talked long into the night, with Tajuna eventually falling asleep in one of his chairs. He told his students to rest up, he himself would need to rest too eventually. This whole cult thing needed investigating. Chapter 12, Zabuza gets a free sample. Zabuza was once again on top of a building overlooking the city. It has been a couple of days since Gat died, and he and Haku were still waiting for their mysterious employer's messenger. The cult took control of Wave without any issues after that. Not many people opposed them. Apparently most of the previous government were killed or ran away. The ones that cooperated with Gat were given the choice of a quiet retirement or exile. Quite peaceful really. He wondered how Mo's. Hello. A familiar voice spoke up from behind him. It is time. This time, Zabuza didn't draw his sword, although he did tense up slightly upon hearing that bird once again. Haku stood up to attention, having learned to remain vigilant around the creature. Stop sneaking up on me, he growled lowly under his breath. What do you mean it's time? You will receive your payment. It explained calmly before jumping off the roof they were standing on and gliding down onto the street below them both. Follow me. Zabuza stared at it for a moment longer before shrugging dismissively and leaping over the edge after it, landing easily on his feet, with Haku following right behind him. Where are we going? He asked curiously as they walked through an alleyway together. To a hidden shrine. The crow answered simply enough. You will receive your reward, and then you will meet with your new handler, the one responsible for working with you on the teaching. Zabuza nodded wordlessly as they continued walking along silently. It wasn't long until they reached their destination, a rundown-looking building located somewhere deep within the city. If one didn't know what to look for, they would assume it was abandoned due to its state of disrepair. This way. The crow instructed before flying off into a hatch leading downwards into darkness below them. Zabuza glanced over towards Haku briefly before entering after it. His student looked rather nervous about all this, but he couldn't blame him, he himself had contemplated turning around more than once already. But if this thing wanted them dead, he would have been killed a while ago. So here they were now. They entered an empty room, lit dimly by torchlight. It was mostly empty besides some chairs and a table sitting in the center. Sit down. The crow instructed again, landing atop said piece of furniture. We will begin shortly. Zabuza glanced around warily once more before slowly lowering himself onto one of those chairs. Haku did likewise next to him. First things first, it began speaking again after ensuring both men were seated comfortably enough. You will be receiving a choice between 3 rewards, each tailored to your tastes. They are as follows. Suddenly, 3 objects appeared before Zabuza, floating in midair between himself and the bird creature sitting across from him. 2 of them were small bottles filled with liquid, one red-colored while the other was blue-tinted, and the third was a small cube made out of blue glass-like material. The first is a potion that was created long ago. It is the first in a sequence of potions meant to turn you into a god, although this first one is merely a catalyst for the rest. The crow explained calmly while gesturing towards the blue bottle with its wing. It will make you slightly stronger and improve your balance. The second effect will give you night vision. You will be able to clearly in darkness as well as light. Zabuza didn't react outwardly at all at hearing these words, simply keeping his expression neutral throughout the entire explanation. The third effect is the ability to breathe underwater for 10 minutes and being able to move in water as if it were air, and finally, you will gain the ability to manifest phantom scales on your skin. These are tough enough to resist a kunai or a regular blade. It finished explaining before looking back at Zabuza again expectantly. Any questions? It asked politely after allowing him some time to absorb everything. Zabuza thought about it for a few seconds. The variety of effects was making him suspicious. They were all things related to each other, water, and fish. He thought he knew what kind of god this sequence of potions would create, but that wasn't really relevant at the moment. Yes, what do you mean by turning me into a god? He questioned curiously, wondering how far he could pry into what these things were. Just as I said, if you drink all the potions in the sequence, you will become a god. The crow answered cryptically. Unfortunately, the higher potions are lost, and as such not available, no matter how much you do for the Watcher. I see. Zabuza muttered quietly under his breath before falling silent once more. The second one, it began again, after waiting patiently. Is a blessing of sorts, it is a minor one, but still quite helpful. You will be able to generate water from nothing at your will and control it to a degree. Being submerged in water will also heal you. This one was much simpler, very straightforward, but Zabuza knew it was more versatile than the first potion. Water was both a weapon and a tool, he could use his jutsu more freely if he had this. But, the regeneration aspect was extremely useful on its own. And the last reward is this, it said before pointing towards the third object floating between them, the bottle filled with red liquid inside it. It is not for you, instead, it is for your blade. Zabuza looked at the vial curiously again, trying to discern anything about its contents by sight alone. After a moment of staring intently, however, he gave up and turned back to face the crow. Blood. Exactly, Kubikarib's ability to absorb blood means this is possible. This blood belongs to my patron's divine guardians, now extinct after his great slumber. The crow began explaining once more calmly. It contains the aspect that made them most feared, their ability to be a paradox. They were creatures that existed in two states at once. Zabuza had no idea what the hell any of that meant. As such, when absorbed by your weapon, it will become one as well, it continued unabashedly despite Zabuza's confused expression. It can exist in two different places at once. What does that mean? He finally asked after realizing that he wouldn't get it without some help. For example, you can throw your blade, and it will not leave your hand. This effect is limited, of course. It explained patiently before continuing further. But its main use would be for feints and surprise attacks. The effect only lasts 10 seconds before you must choose where the blade truly exists. That was really powerful actually. He could slash with both hands and pick the one that wasn't blocked, or as the crow said, throw the sword into a group and then keep it to attack an enemy from behind. So many possibilities. Do you require more time to think? It asked politely enough after seeing him sit silently for a while now. Zabuza didn't answer, still weighing the pros and cons of each reward. On one hand, he wanted that potion. Being immune to kunao and weak sword strikes was already amazing, the rest of the potion was less useful, but every aspect was still something he wanted. The blessing, on the other hand, was wonderful, water everywhere, healing him at all times. And his jutsu became that much easier to use, his biggest ones always required water around him to use. This alone would make him stronger than ever before. Finally, there was the vial of blood. Its effects were less flashy than the rest, but probably the most unique. He knew jutsu existed that did what the first potion did. He knew that a water ninjutsu prodigy could draw water from the very air itself even in a desert. But having your weapon exist in two places at once? That was truly unique. While it didn't provide a direct boost to his power as much as the other rewards, it would make him a nightmare to fight. The crow interrupted his thoughts again by speaking up suddenly. If you continue to serve my patron, then you can get all three of these rewards in time. Well, that just made it easier. Zabuza was fully willing to do extra work for stuff like this. Money could be earned, but these things? They were priceless. Zabuza chuckled slightly under his breath at how absurd everything has gotten ever since meeting this fucking bird. Sure, why not? Your choice. It asked expectantly again after letting him take another minute or so to think things through. The potion, Zabuza said firmly, if he could eventually get all of these, then the one that allowed him to stay alive longer would be the first pick. Then the blood for his sword, and finally the blessing. A wise choice. It complemented before the other two items vanished into thin air while the bottle floated towards him slowly until he could grab it. He wasted no time opening the cork and chugging down its contents as fast as possible. He felt his throat burn slightly with every gulp of liquid that passed through his lips. After finishing off every last drop, he placed the now empty container onto the table in front of him once more. Zabuza tensed slightly as he felt something shift within himself, a sort of tingle throughout his entire body, from head to toe, making him shiver involuntarily for just a brief moment before returning back to normal again. His vision suddenly shifted colors slightly, everything looked brighter than usual. He looked down at his hands, noticing scales materializing across them almost instantly after willing it so. They were a dark shade of blue with light gray edges around each individual scale. Curious, he drew a kunao from one of his pouches attached to his leg and slashed down against his palm. It slid off like it was nothing. He even tried stabbing his hand, but it didn't sink in at all. Well, he said out loud while grinning widely underneath his bandages. This is quite useful. Indeed. The crow agreed. 2. Be careful, it doesn't use chakra, but it requires stamina to manifest. The more you cover your body with it, the more energy it uses up. It informed him calmly. Try moving around, you should notice an improvement in your balance. Zabuza nodded silently as he stood up and began walking around slowly at first before picking up speed gradually. His steps felt smoother, and his body seemed more stable than ever before. This would be quite handy on uneven terrain or anywhere where footing may become an issue. Zabuza smirked evilly underneath his mask once again. If only he had received these things before his attempted coup on the Mizu cage. Well, no use crying over spilled blood. I have one last question, he spoke up after sitting back down again. When does this whole teaching thing start? You will start tomorrow, the crow answered simply enough. Your handler will arrive soon, and I shall introduce you both. That's fine by me. Zabuza replied nonchalantly, this whole thing was turning out to be pretty good so far. Hikari entered the room quietly, she had been told to come here by the messenger, although she wasn't sure why exactly yet. It seemed important though. Hello Hikari. The messenger greeted her politely as usual before gesturing towards two people sitting down at a table nearby. She recognized the headband on the bigger one, a missing nin? Hello, sir. She replied politely back before bowing slightly in respect to the bird. These are Zabuza Momokai and Hakuyuki, it introduced both men respectively, who nodded their heads briefly when their names were mentioned. Zabuza is currently cooperating with us, he will be teaching the followers I asked you to gather, Haku is his apprentice. The messenger continued speaking. Hikari, you will work together with Zabuza, answer any questions he has, and get him the materials necessary for teaching. She looked over at Zabuza curiously upon hearing those words coming from its mouth. Was this what the message had meant when it said Zabuza would not be a problem? Yes, Hikari. It replied as if reading her thoughts. Which honestly was something she wouldn't put past it. What exactly am I supposed to teach? Zabuza asked suddenly, without preamble or hesitation whatsoever. Everything you know, chakra control, jutsu, tactics, anything and everything you deem necessary. The messenger answered calmly again before continuing. Your students are meant to be the protectors of the church. Both of them nodded their heads in understanding, this wasn't too much different than what they expected so far. I will leave you two alone now, there is no need for me to remain here any longer. It stated simply again before taking off through the open window above them all. Leaving Hikari alone with them both. Well. I suppose you wish to know more about your students? She asked after a moment or two of awkward silence passed between them all. Sure. Zabuza shrugged dismissively while leaning backward slightly against his chair. How many are there? 24 at the moment. Hikari and Zabuza spent the next few hours discussing her current students and the church in general. The Watcher wanted its followers to be ready for anything that may come their way in the future. Even if that meant learning how to fight from someone like Zabuza Momokai. Chapter 13, First Living Creation and Kakashi Fucks Around. The next morning, Kakashi decided it would be best if he gathered intel about what had happened during the last few days. As such, he sent his cute little genin to train with a shadow clone while he went around the town. Honestly, it wasn't too hard to gather information, the town was bustling with life and everyone seemed excited and happy. He had asked a few questions here and there, trying to keep a low profile, but apparently, he didn't need to do that at all. They were willing to talk about this new religion like they would the weather. He learned about the woman who seemed to be the high priestess of this cult, how she led them into battle against Gat's men, her name was Haruka, and apparently, she was pretty charismatic. No one had any bad words to say about her. There seemed to be 4 other people alongside her who formed the higher hierarchy of the church, he made sure to learn their names just in case. A man named Kazuo, another called Kenji, Hikari, and lastly Ayamu, the one that was burned alive by Gat. He learned a bit more about this cult's beliefs, they worshipped a being known as the Watcher behind the stars, or simply the Watcher. From what he could gather, their beliefs were based around said entity watching over them from somewhere out there in the cosmos. Honestly? It felt kind of bare bones, even if he didn't know much about religion, he knew that usually, they had more depth than this one. But then again, it was only a few months old at most. In any case, he won't get more information by merely asking around town, he needed to do some field work. It took him only half an hour of stalking before he found one of the figures he had learned about earlier, Kenji was his name. He was currently preaching from atop a wooden stage that was built on a plaza near the center of town. The man seemed energetic and passionate, Kakashi noted with mild interest as he listened carefully from afar. Kenji spoke loudly enough for everyone present around him to hear clearly what he said without straining their ears too much. Most people listened for a bit before going back to their business. And remember, we are not alone, unity is strength. Kakashi simply waited patiently until the man finished talking and stepped down off the podium. A few people came up afterward to chat briefly with him before leaving themselves. Once they were gone completely, Kenji began walking away from the area, with Kakashi following behind him discreetly as he went about his way throughout the city. After another 10 minutes or so of trailing after his target, Kenji finally stopped moving forward when another plaza on the opposite side of the city came into view. This gave Kakashi a bad feeling instantly, and once Kenji climbed on top of yet another stage. "Good afternoon everyone!" he shouted cheerfully while waving both arms above his head enthusiastically. "Praise the Watcher!" Kakashi sighed in exasperation at this turn of events. He just hoped Team 7 was training properly. DP 4559. I metaphorically leaned back against my chair with a sigh of relief after finally getting Zabuza's reward out of the way. It felt good to have that taken care of. He chose the knockoff sailor potion, which was unexpected. I thought for sure he would go for the sword upgrade first. But no, apparently, defense is more important than offense, at least to him. Which honestly, fair enough, man didn't get to be in his late 20s in the deadliest profession by being stupid. Hikari seemed like she wasn't going to be an issue, and neither did Zabuza. If anything, both of them seemed rather cooperative with one another. With this being finished, I only had a couple of things left to do. The crows were the next thing on the agenda, but that shouldn't be too hard. And with the abundance of DP I could now afford to create something a bit more expensive. Time to make a divine beast. I started with the body, going for a crow's head with an elongated body akin to a wolf. Its limbs were longer than a wolf's, with feathers covering its body almost entirely. Its tail was also like a wolf's, thick and fluffy, just small feathers instead of fur. As a final touch, I gave it an extra eye on its forehead, although this one was slanted vertically rather than horizontally. And of course, I made all the eyes gold. Gotta have that branding in. Actually, one final touch, for real this time. I made the skin flow, making it so when it moved, sometimes it shone through the black coat of feathers, giving an illusion of a starry sky whenever you saw it move. Now for the abilities, obviously I made them physically strong and smart. That would already put them in the upper tiers when combined with their size. I already experimented with their main ability while I was designing my Zabuza's sword upgrade. Basically, they split themselves at will, both existing simultaneously as one being, and then choose which one is real. This caused the fake one to disappear. This made them almost immortal, since to kill one, you needed to kill both at the same time. They could also just split and attack you with one body, while the other ran away. The one thing that they lacked was range, so I gave them the ability to fire lasers from their mouths. It wasn't too powerful, but it would kill any ordinary shinobi, maybe a bit uncreative, but hey, laser beams are always cool. As a side effect of not having chakra, they were resistant to a lot of genjutsu, although there was probably some way around this. I wasn't going to bet them being immune to Tsukushima or something similar. All in all, pretty strong stuff, likely equivalent to a Jainin. Although, they would fare poorly against anything with large area of effect attacks. Finally, the last thing to do was naming them. Star Eaters sounded nice, yeah, let's go with that. Now I just gather some DP, and slap a mind into the one in front of me, full of all the knowledge I had and a healthy sense of loyalty and love for the followers of the Watcher, and done. It came alive right as I finished the process, blinking its eyes up at me curiously. "Hello, Creator." It spoke calmly and respectfully towards me. "Thank you for giving me life." "Oh wait, oh shit, I just created a child. Am I dad now? Because it was born from my divine power, does that mean I'm both mom and dad?" Kakashi was exhausted. Kenji apparently preached until sunset every day, going around several plazas all across the city. That meant he had to follow him around all day. But he learned much about this cult thanks to that. Most of it seemed not so bad, actually. The values were simple enough: love each other and unite to conquer adversity. Now he only needed to get a measure of the leadership of the cult itself and determine if they were truly benign, or if they were simply using the religion to amass power for themselves. Thankfully, it seems like Kenji was actually meeting with someone important tonight, unless he sleeps in a cellar under one of the buildings here. It was a rather creepy place if you asked him. He silently followed him inside and hid within the rafters above the room Kenji entered, watching as he walked up to an empty chair at the end of a large table and sat down there. Not long after, more people began entering through the door behind Kenji. First, a rather old-looking man who smelled like medicine walked into the room and sat down across from Kenji on the other side of the table. A few seconds later, a woman entered afterward wearing a white robe similar to Kenji's own clothing. Kakashi instantly recognized her as Haruka, the high priestess of this cult. She looked almost exactly like what was described to him earlier today by some of the locals he had talked to. Next came another younger woman wearing regular civilian clothes. She had short brown hair tied back tightly into a small ponytail that hung loosely between her shoulders. She, too, took her seat next to where the old man sat earlier, leaving just one remaining chair available, which remained empty so far. Everyone present seemed relaxed enough around each other though. So there wasn't anything too odd about any of this yet. Nothing suspicious whatsoever either if you didn't count how shady these meetings were being held in a cellar under an abandoned building. I assume everyone has enjoyed our break day? Except Kenji, I saw you preaching. Haruka asked after taking her place at the head of the table. Preaching about the glory of the Watcher is enjoyable. Kenji replied happily, earning some chuckles from everyone else present inside the room. Well then, since we all had time to rest, she started speaking once more. I think it's time we start talking about our future. Finally, something not boring, he remembers now why he stopped taking infiltration missions. Haruka continued without waiting for anyone else to speak up first. First things first, taxes. Kakashi wanted to jump off a cliff. Chapter 14, Kakashi finds out, and the training arc begins. The prospective trainees were gathering in an empty clearing outside of town. There were mostly adults, although there were a few teenagers and 2 children within the crowd. They came from different walks of life, fishermen, farmers, regular workers. Mostly an even split between women and men. Many of them looked determined, while others just seemed nervous or anxious about what might happen next. Zabuza didn't really care either way as he watched them all gather. He had told Haku and the 2 idiots to go train. After years on the run, he learned that taking every opportunity to get stronger was a must. And from what he had seen, they were all the safest they had been in years. The fucking crow was here too. It landed on top of his head and then just stayed there for some reason. He wanted to cut the thing down, just because of the stress it had caused him these past few days, but he wasn't suicidal yet. Once Hikari arrives, she will have a little spy tailing her. The crow spoke up from its perch atop Zabuza's head. Kakashi Hatake, Jainin of Konoha. Oh, so the thing wasn't here just to piss him off, good to know. What am I supposed to do about that? He asked with a grunt of annoyance, although he already had an idea. While outsiders finding out that Wave will have its own chakra using force is unavoidable, it answered in its usual blank tone. The knowledge of the blessings must be kept secret to prevent greed and fear. When he arrives, entertain him for a bit, but refrain from killing him. About what he expected, the no-killing part grated his nerves a bit, but a chance to test out his newfound abilities was always welcome. From what he remembers of Kakashi's bingo book entry, he should be a good challenge. Not long after, Hikari arrived and Zabuza surprisingly didn't notice anyone tailing her, which meant the guy was good. Whatever, the crow will probably alert him when he makes his move. Throw your sword at the tree to the right of Hikari, he is about halfway up. The fucking bird spoke directly into his mind this time. Since when can he do that? Well, it would be rude not to do as told. He threw Kubikaribj just as instructed, jumping after it and landing on it. Before the blade struck the tree, a shape jumped from the branches and landed on one knee. The crow flying away before he jumped. "A shinobi!" he announced loudly enough for everyone present to hear him. "How long were you watching us?" "Long enough," Kakashi said nonchalantly. "I didn't expect to find Zabuza Mamakai here, of all places." "I could say the same for you," Zabuza said while grabbing his blade and pulling it out of the tree it was lodged in. "What would a Konoha shinobi be doing so far away from home?" "Just sightseeing." Kakashi shrugged before looking over at the gathered crowd, then back towards Zabuza. "Is there a reason you decided to get involved with this cult?" "Not your business." Zabuza shot back, feeling slightly excited by the chance to test his new abilities. "You're right, it isn't." Kakashi replied nonchalantly. "But I still want to know." "Keep wondering then, Cyclops." Zabuza growled back, annoyed by Kakashi's relaxed attitude. How about this? I tell you if you can beat me in a fight, and if I win, you answer all of my questions. Mah, that sounds too true. Blesso. He didn't even get to finish his sentence before Zabuza dashed forward and swung his sword at him. Kakashi managed to block it with the kunai he had drawn from his pouch, but the force of the impact caused him to get launched deeper into the forest. They landed far away from everyone else, giving them space to fight. Everyone stared at the direction in which Zabuza had just launched the shinobi, not sure what to do. Do they wait? Do they follow them? Be at ease, Zabuza will handle this. The messenger spoke up from its new perch atop Hikari's head. While he is entertaining that intruder, I shall explain your role in our church. Everyone was snapped out of their thoughts by hearing the messenger speak, its voice instantly bringing calmness to all of those present. You will be granted power to protect, it continued after ensuring everyone was paying attention. To allow the faithful to live their lives without worry or fear. A heavy weight descended upon everyone's mind, causing many to shiver slightly under its pressure. It will not be an easy life, you will face death and violence, pain and loss, sacrifice and hardship. As it spoke, it hopped down from Hikari's head, landing softly on the ground before everyone. Its body grew larger and longer. Its bones cracked and shifted, and its voice became deeper as it continued speaking. You will sign your life away, it will seem like torture, constant training and battle, with no rest for years. Its tail elongated, it grew even bigger, to the point it stood taller than all of them, and then on its forehead a third eye opened, golden and vertical. There will be little reward besides the knowledge that you will keep others safe, the people might fear your power, or hate you for being different. Everyone felt a primal unease at seeing the creature before them, one they were unable to look away from, its voice boomed in their heads. Do you still wish to continue? Everyone swallowed nervously at the question asked by the beast, but nobody stepped back. They had all come too far now, and nothing would stop them from trying. It made a pleased sound, something akin to a bird trilling, except deeper. Very well. You have chosen well, Hikari. With those last words said, the sky turned dark as a familiar being appeared in everyone's sight. Its form was made of the stars themselves, its body towering over them all. Then by the grace of the Watcher, the messenger spoke with reverence clear in its voice. You shall be blessed. The Watcher spoke. A blessing of strength. A blessing of learning. Protect the faithful. They felt their bodies shift and change, old scars and old pains fading for many, replaced instead by vigor and health. Their minds grew sharper, making everything seem clearer, questions they once had suddenly become obvious. With that, the sky cleared again, the Watcher vanished from view, and the messenger shrank into its original size once more. It flew away, not saying anything else. No one spoke up as silence fell over the group again. Kakashi jumped back again to avoid another swing from Zabuza's sword. This was proving to be more trouble than he expected. He wasn't exactly going all out, but he also wasn't slacking off. This was a dangerous foe, he could feel it in his bones. What's wrong? Zabuza asked mockingly while moving closer toward Kakashi. Not used to fighting against someone stronger than you. Kakashi didn't reply, merely keeping his guard up as he watched Zabuza carefully. Suddenly, the mist-nin vanished completely from sight in a blur of speed. He barely managed to block another swing with his kunai, but this time he was prepared for the impact. Using his chakra to cling onto the ground below him, he leaned backwards with Zabuza's swing, redirection the swing upwards and over his head, before stabbing forward with his other arm, hitting Zabuza in the stomach with a kunai. But instead of stabbing through flesh, it slid off harmlessly, phantom scales manifesting across the skin of Zabuza's body. He had no time to be confused about what just happened, as Zabuza used the momentum from his failed attack to spin around, kicking Kakashi in the ribs, launching him into a tree. Oh ho, that's pretty good, not even a scratch, Zabuza spoke in an impressed tone while rubbing at where he was stabbed. Just like advertised. Kakashi grunted painfully as he stood back up again, looks like he would have to take this seriously. He reached up toward his headband and pulled it up, revealing his Sharingan. Alright then, mind using that jutsu again? He asked after getting ready once more. Zabuza chuckled before spreading his arms wide. Be my guest. Scales covered his body once more, their shimmering blue color reflecting the sunlight brightly around them. Kakashi stared intently at him through his Sharingan for any opening in his defense, anything he could use to his advantage. What? Kakashi muttered out loud in disbelief. Zabuza wasn't using any chakra at all, there was no flow of energy whatsoever around him or inside his body. Surprised? Zabuza asked smugly. You really should stop being such a lazy ass, you might actually be a threat if you stopped copying everyone else's tricks. Kakashi didn't reply as he dashed towards Zabuza again, feinting another stab before going for a roundhouse kick instead. It missed, but that wasn't the point. Zabuza's counter slash went through him, cutting him in half without much resistance. His body burst into smoke as the real Kakashi burst from the ground underneath Zabuza with his kunao covered in lighting chakra. Zabuza blocked it with his free hand, scales forming a barrier between the two. But this time, it wasn't enough. A small trail of blood formed on his palm, not deep enough to disable it, but still a wound. So that's the catch, Kakashi commented calmly while jumping backwards again. Not all attacks are equal, hey. Zabuza merely grinned under his mask at this observation. It looks like you finally decided to take me seriously. I guess I should do the same. He replied back confidently before raising one arm, sword in hand, above himself and forming a single-handed sign. Water style, hiding in mist technique. Almost instantly, the surrounding area was filled with dense white fog that obscured vision completely, even Kakashi's Sharingan could barely see anything past 5 feet ahead of him. I am curious, Zabuza called out through the mist. What will prevail? Your Sharingan or my silent killing technique? Kakashi didn't respond as he focused his senses on tracking down his opponent. Suddenly, he heard a rustling sound nearby, followed by what sounded like footsteps running across leaves. Without hesitation, he threw 3 shuriken at where the noise came from, hitting nothing but air. Too slow. A voice whispered right next to his ear as pain exploded throughout his left shoulder, causing him to grunt loudly in surprise. He tried to turn around quickly enough to face whoever attacked him, however, all he saw was more empty space within the fog. Another attack came, this time aimed directly for his heart. Kakashi twisted out of the way, just barely avoiding it completely. The blade scraped against his vest, leaving a long gash across its side instead. He threw himself away from the source of the attack, creating some distance between them once again. His breathing became heavier as adrenaline pumped through his veins. He jumped high in the air and started weaving hand signs. Wind release, great balloon. A twister formed beneath him that began expanding outward rapidly until it blew away most of the mist covering the forest floor below him. When he landed back down onto solid ground, however, there was no sign of Zabuza anywhere nearby. What's wrong? Kakashi asked aloud while scanning the area carefully. Running scared already? Zabuza chuckled somewhere off to his right. Hardly. Kakashi instantly turned around to face the direction the sound came from, readying himself for another surprise attack. Instead, however, what he received was a hailstorm of shuriken flying toward him at high speeds. He easily deflected them with his kunao, but it left him wide open for a second, allowing Zabuza to appear right beside him and slash down vertically. Kakashi blocked it with his kunao once again, but he forced to kneel down to do so, leaving him completely vulnerable. You really need better situational awareness, Zabuza commented as he pressed harder against Kakashi's guard. I expect more from the famed copy nin. Kakashi smirked behind his mask, I don't think you should lecture me about awareness. Clone great explosion. A voice spoke from behind Zabuza, before the Kakashi in front of him exploded violently. He tried to jump away, but it was too late, his entire body was blown into the air and sent crashing into a nearby tree. But he got back up almost immediately afterward, not seeming to be wounded in any way by the explosion. Scales fading away again. Interesting trick. Zabuza mused while cracking his neck with his non-wounded hand. I was wondering why you used such a big wind jutsu, you wasted so much chakra just to trick me into getting close to your clone. Well, anyway, I have a job to do. He raised his free arm and made a few hand seals. Water release, hiding in mist technique. Another wall of thick white mist covered the area instantly, this time even thicker than before. Kakashi was really starting to hate this jutsu. He mentally ran down all the ways he could think of to get rid of the fog again, but everything seemed like a waste of chakra for very little gain. Especially considering that Zabuza would just make it come back. The scales were annoying too, although they could be penetrated by a sufficiently powerful attack, as he discovered when he tried to stab him with his lightning-coated kunao. It seemed the defense was also internal, unlike the earth-based armor techniques he knew, since the explosion did nothing. Genjutsu then? He waited patiently for Zabuza to make his move, his Sharingan keeping track of the surroundings. And then he waited some more. And even more. This guy sure does take his time. After waiting another couple of minutes, the fog finally cleared away completely, revealing an empty forest once again. Did he just leave? He frowned slightly before glancing around cautiously one last time, just to make sure. Nope, no one else here besides him now. He let out a sigh as he slowly relaxed himself. This job was really turning out to be annoying. Chapter 15, Hey kids, I am not suspicious. I felt rather giddy, I just got to watch my first real ninja fight. Honestly, it was pretty cool to see, even if both of them seemed to be holding back quite a bit. I wonder how my Star Eater would fare against either one of them. It would probably end in a draw. Kakashi probably had a technique powerful enough to blow two Star Eaters up at the same time, which would bypass their paradox ability, but I knew that his main weakness was his lack of chakra capacity, and if I knew it then my Star Eaters would too, so they wouldn't give him the chance. Either way, Kakashi finally left my people alone after that and headed back to town. At least for now. He hasn't seen anything too concerning yet, so that's nice. Now, hopefully, he leaves soon so I can stop stressing out over him discovering something he shouldn't. The first Star Eater I made is also doing well. Thankfully I did give him most of my knowledge while putting the mind within the body, so he had no trouble adjusting. I made some floating rocks that would fly around my realm as homes for him and his brothers, fully hollow with lots of space for anything they want to put inside, with the added benefit that sometimes when they got close enough to the main island they would look like shooting stars. The first thing he did when he got to his one was ask me to make some pillows, and then promptly fell asleep on them. How cute, once he wakes up, I'll name him if he doesn't have a name already. The blessings I gave my warriors were also already proving their worth, all of them managed to already feel their chakra after a couple tries. My plan there was to first just give them the ability to learn, and then after we get a good idea of what they can do, start making specialized blessings for each one, that way I don't waste a bunch of DP because these blessings weren't cheap. They should basically be prodigies in all matters related to learning. Sadly didn't have enough juice to make them all as smart as Orochimaru, but hey, in terms of comprehending chakra and combat, they should be right up there with him. Honestly, besides keeping an eye out for Kakashi I didn't have much to do currently. The four leaders of the church were already hard at work basically rebuilding Wave's government from the ground up. I felt bad for just leaving them like this, but being a god didn't magically give me the knowledge I needed to run a country. And if I had some spare time, I can go try something, while not too important at the moment, could be extremely useful in the future. It would also be a nice form of revenge on Kakashi for snooping around so much. Sasuke was frustrated. Technically, they were supposed to be guarding Tashuna while he finished his bridge, but instead, Kakashi took them all the way out here to some random spot in the forest where they had been training since yesterday. That would have been fine, he needed the training anyway, if he was going to kill that man. But Sakura had perfected tree walking in a few minutes after starting, and then when Kakashi decided to teach her water walking, she also managed it in about half an hour. Kakashi had taken her away to teach her something else, while he and Naruto kept struggling with walking up this stupid tree. It pissed him off, not only because of how easy she seemed to find everything they were taught, but also because he was stuck alone with the idiot. They were tied neck and neck in how far up the tree they could walk. Gah! Naruto shouted as he fell down to the ground once more, landing on his back with a thud. Damn it! Sasuke just grunted as he continued trying to climb higher than before. He closed his eyes tightly as he tried to concentrate better, willing his chakra to flow through himself and into the ground beneath him. He ran towards the trunk of the large oak tree and started running upwards again. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. He gritted his teeth together as he felt his control slip slightly after reaching his previous limit. And in his attempt to fix it, he ended up cracking the bark and falling backwards onto the grass below him with an audible thud. Wow, you guys sure are working hard. A cheerful voice spoke up from behind both boys, causing them to turn around quickly and see who it was. It was a man wearing simple brown clothing under a cheap-looking robe. The most notable thing about him was his burn scars, that covered almost half his face and his arms. The other thing was his eyes, they had a gold ring around them. Oi! Who are you? Naruto asked loudly while standing back up on his feet. You better be ready if you are here to mess with us. Oh no, I'm not here to fight. The stranger chuckled before bowing slightly toward Naruto in greeting. My name is Ayamu, a pleasure to meet you. Sasuke eyed him cautiously, how did he manage to sneak up on them without either one noticing? He didn't seem like much of a threat at first glance, though. What do you want then? Sasuke asked coldly, still eyeing this Ayamu guy suspiciously. I just saw you both training and decided to stop by for a bit, Ayamu said, still smiling cheerfully. It's not every day you see an Uzumaki and an Uchiha training together, especially not nowadays. Sasuke tensed slightly upon hearing that. Why would this man know their family names? Also, what did he mean by Uzumaki and Uchiha? Did Naruto's family have a history with the Uchiha? So you know who we are? Naruto asked excitedly, not the reaction you're supposed to have to a random man knowing your name in the middle of the forest, Naruto. Hey wait, what did you mean about Uzumaki and Uchiha? Ayamu looked surprised for a second, before his eyes softened slightly. Ah, I should have guessed. He cleared his throat before explaining. Before the village system was implemented, there were several clans spread all around the continent, each with their own history, traditions, and customs. He motioned towards both of them. You are both born into one of these clans, although neither of you seem to have been taught much about the Uzumaki clan, considering your surprise. A shinobi from a clan normally has a special technique or a bloodline limit, like my Sharingan. Sasuke spoke up again in an attempt to distract himself, blurting out the first thing that came to mind. Does Naruto's have something similar? Yet. Naruto nodded rapidly while agreeing with Sasuke's words excitedly. Do I have a cool ability too? Ah, yes, Ayamu replied. The Uzumaki had an incredibly powerful life force, allowing them to have much greater stamina and vitality than regular people. Some also had the ability to heal others by giving them their chakra, some others could manifest chains made from chakra from their bodies. Naruto seemed thrilled at hearing this information, bouncing around like he always does. On the other hand, Sasuke was curious about how this man knew all that. This guy was very suspicious. And lastly, probably their most famous trait is their proficiency with seals. Ayamu concluded. There was a great deal of knowledge lost when the Uzumaki clan was slaughtered during the Second Great Ninja War. Sasuke twitched slightly upon hearing those words. He glanced over at Naruto, who looked sad upon hearing that. He really didn't know what to do here. He would be lying if he denied looking down on Naruto for acting like a buffoon all the time, but hearing about his clan being wiped out made him feel a slight kinship with the blonde boy. I see. Was all Sasuke could muster up as he watched Naruto's expression fall further into sadness. Thankfully, Ayamu broke the silence after it got too awkward. Well, anyways, the reason that I said it was surprising to see an Uchiha and Uzumaki together, is because both clans had a troubled history. He smiled sheepishly. The Uzumaki were closely allied with the Senju clan, and fought several times against the Uchiha in wars before the village system was created. Sasuke shifted uncomfortably at the reminder of how little he knew about his family's history. It grated on him that a stranger knew more than he did. Oh! Was all he could say at first, so his clan used to fight against Naruto's? Wait, how did you know that we are from those clans? Ayamu looked at him drily. You have your clan symbol on your shoulder, and he has it on his back. Sasuke frowned, looking at Naruto's shoulder. That swirly symbol was the Uzumaki clan crest? Wait, if Naruto didn't know about the Uzumaki clan, then who gave him that crest? Sadly, I have to go, but when you are back in Konoha you should ask a person called Hatake Kakashi about seals and the Uzumaki, that man trained under Minato Namikaze, husband of Kushina Uzumaki. Ayamu said with another bow. It was a pleasure meeting you too. Kakashi-sensei knew someone from Naruto's clan? Sasuke frowned. Why didn't he ever mention anything about it? Before they could ask anything, Ayamu started to walk away. Naruto seemed to want to say something, but Sasuke put his hand over his mouth before he could. He was going to be telling Kakashi-sensei about this encounter, that was far too weird. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Naruto elbowing him in the stomach. He let go of him with a wince. Hey! What the hell was that for? Naruto yelled while rubbing his lips, glaring angrily at Sasuke. For once, just shut up. Sasuke hissed back coldly, causing Naruto's anger to flare even more so than usual. That guy was weird. Naruto growled before turning around and walking towards the tree again, clearly upset with being told off like that. But Naruto stopped halfway there and turned back towards him. Hey! He asked quietly, looking somewhat unsure. Do you think that Kushina woman was related to me? Sasuke felt slightly uncomfortable again. he wasn't good at social interactions, less so when dealing with another person's emotions. But we can ask Kakashi-sensei about her once we see him next. He said back calmly, watching as Naruto's mood seemed to lighten up immediately after hearing those words. He didn't like seeing Naruto sad, it was too foreign for him to deal with. He was much better at handling the annoying blonde idiot when he was screaming at the top of his lungs, not moping around. The next few hours were spent in relative silence as both of them worked on their tree walking exercises. Hope you enjoy answering awkward questions, Kakashi. I knew this was going to make Kakashi even more paranoid about Wave now, while Naruto and Sasuke were naive enough that nothing I said sounded too out of place, but to Kakashi it would sound extremely suspicious. Not many people know about the relationship between Kushina and Minato. Hell, most people in Konoha probably didn't know that the fourth Hokage had a wife. And if they did, most of those likely didn't know she was an Uzumaki. Of course, that wasn't the only reason I had done what I did, I also wanted to check out the seal on Naruto. Honestly, Uzumaki were insane, I had no idea what the fuck I was looking at when I examined it. It was like an ant colony, a lot of small parts working together in tandem to accomplish something much larger, thousands of squiggly lines moving around. At least, that's what it looked like to me. I had no way to mess with it without fucking everything up, and messing up could result in Naruto exploding into a giant sentient fox-shaped chakra monster. That did mean I couldn't talk to Kurama and ask him about the Tsutsuki, which was a shame. He was one of only 10 beings that knew anything about them in this whole world. But hey, I guess you win some and lose some. Guess I will have to wait until my boys and girls are strong enough to go get the Sanbai, he should be free right now. But that would take a few months, even with my blessings, so no point rushing it. I didn't need a Jinchuriki, but I already fucked Kanon up, the chances of Kaguya being freed were high, so I needed to prepare. And everyone knows the first step to win a war is information. Chapter 16, Kakashi is done with this bullshit and the crows come home. Kakashi returned to Tajina's house as a defeated man. Well, not really, but that's how he felt. He had to cut his investigation short due to the fact that he couldn't get close enough to the main leaders of Wave's new government due to Zabuza being here. He didn't want to risk another confrontation while his students were still on the island. The ordinary people didn't know too much about the cult's goals or plans either. So, when he returned to Konoha he could tell the Hokage yet, a bunch of cultists took over Wave, they hired Zabuza Momokai to maybe train them. And that was it. Technically, they were supposed to guard the bridge builder for another few days, but Tajuna himself said they could go if they wanted. He was tempted to do so, he wasn't equipped for a long-term infiltration mission, and the current situation of this country seemed stable enough that there shouldn't be any problems with leaving. Plus, he didn't want to deal with Zabuza again. The man was dangerous, his ability to restrict his Sharingan and his physical toughness made him a dangerous foe for Kakashi. Without full access to the Sharingan, it would have been an extremely difficult fight. So, he returned to Tajuna's house, where his 3 genin were still training under the supervision of his shadow clone. He went to get Naruto and Sasuke first. Sakura could enjoy his personal tutelage a bit longer, he should look into genjutsu and medical ninjutsu when he gets back. She was better at chakra control than he was, and he considered himself pretty good at it. Sasuke, Naruto. He called out as he approached them both boys laying on the ground, panting heavily. Before he could even say anything, Naruto jumped up excitedly before speaking. Tell me about Kushina. Kakashi stared at him for a moment, processing what was said. What? Oh. And tell me about that Minato guy, and seals. And chains. Kakashi choked on his spit. What? It was incredibly funny seeing Kakashi run around in a panic with shadow clones. He even checked Ayamo's original grave, only to find blackened bones. But he was finally leaving, after one last night of searching the forest. He would be returning to Konoha, taking his 3 little ducklings with him. Now I could actually relax, and first things first. Naming my Star Eater. He was currently flying around the Divine Realm, exploring every nook and cranny he could find. Honestly, it was mostly empty besides the Crow Island and the meteorite homes. But still, he seemed to be enjoying himself. When I called out to him, he flew back into the main island, landing next to me. What is it, my creator? He asked politely, bowing his head slightly. I smiled at seeing that. How cute. Well, you have had some time to come to terms with your existence, but there is one thing you need. His head tilted in curiosity, prompting me to continue. A name. He looked surprised for a second before a happy thrill echoed throughout the realm. Yes. Please give me a name, creator. Starting today, your name shall be Yatagarasu. I declared grandiosely. First of my Star Eaters. Yatagarasu. He tested the sound out with his beak, rolling the word around on his tongue like candy. I shall bear it with pride, creator. Good, good. Now with that taken care of. For now, you can rest, don't be afraid to ask me for anything you might need. He bowed respectfully. Creator, could you make some food? I wish to know what tasting feels like. And something to entertain me. Of course. I waved my hand and created hundreds of little balls of light, each one carrying a different flavor. They scattered all over the realm, floating in the darkness, like stars. It should be easy enough for you to find and eat them. He jumped off the island and flew away towards the closest ball of light. The happiness he felt when the first ball exploded into taste was absolutely adorable. After the first few, I made them run away from him a bit before being eaten, that way it was more fun for him. Life is good. It has been almost 2 weeks since Kakashi left Wave, and it is time. 2 Star Eaters were born on during these weeks, and I expanded the Crow Home Island. I even added a night and day cycle. I didn't want to add a sun to my realm, but I realized I was a god, so I told physics to fuck itself. The sun only existed when you were on the island, if you left it the realm went back to its usual darkness. It wasn't hard, although the size of my DP stores still amazed me, going from barely 2,000 in months to almost 3,000 in a week was baffling. My cult was now giving me DP by the truckload, and they were getting bigger by the day. I sent my crow body to get the Crow clan to come home, it was already in sight. Honestly, I could turn that body into an actual Star Eater, probably should. One day I would have to kill a bitch, and it was more efficient doing it with a body than using DP to cast meteor on them. The crow body landed in the same graveyard as last time, this time though, the Crow clan was waiting for me. They all bowed their heads low to the ground when they saw me approaching. Greetings, Great One. The sage said with a solemn voice. We have gathered as instructed. He seemed very nervous, which was fair. He basically went, hey, give me the impossible, and I responded with, all right, your souls are now mine. Yes, you have. I spoke through the crow body. Are you all ready to depart? The sage hesitated before replying. Great One, due to my rudeness in our earlier meeting, we never discussed the specifics of this arrangement. That is true, what do you wish to know? He looked relieved. Chill dude, you're going to be my people's summoning contract and my divine messengers. I'm not going to eat your soul. My patron is no mortal tyrant, he has no interest in pointless cruelty or spite, ask any questions you wish. He relaxed a little after hearing that. What will this new home entail? A large island, one with plenty of land for nesting, trees to perch on, and space for flying. My realm had expanded several times over in these past 2 weeks. No one will be able to enter without his permission, sickness and wounds will be healed, and old age shall be a distant memory. It sounds like paradise. He admitted with a sigh, looking up at me. How about our souls? What happens if we die? If you wish to die, your soul shall be left free to move on to the Pure Lands. And those who wish to leave. Any who wish to rejoin the mortal world may do so, but the divine secrets they learn will be sealed. The sage seemed satisfied with that answer, although some of the other members of his clan were still worried. Is that all? Yes, Great One. With that said, I created a portal linking my realm with the mortal world. It was pretty expensive, but nothing too bad. In front of the Crow clan, the air itself cracked like glass, pieces disappearing until the divine realm was revealed behind it. Everyone watched in awe as the gateway stabilized. The sage bowed his head respectfully once more before turning back towards his people. All of you, follow me. He commanded firmly. We make for paradise. They, one by one flew into the portal, including the Edgelord Brigade. The last to step through was the sage himself, who looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Great One. He spoke calmly. If we are to serve your patron in any way, we would like to know his name. Ah, fair enough. He is called the Watcher behind the stars. With that said, he bowed once more and flew into the portal, which closed behind him. Chapter 17, Reeling in the Big Fish. Haku coughed slightly as he got off the ground, rubbing the back of his head as he stood up shakily. He had been training alone when Zabuza showed up to spar with him, which ended with him getting slammed into the ground without warning. "You need to be faster than that, Haku." Zabuza scolded him harshly as he approached where the boy was sitting on the floor. "Your reaction time needs work." "Understood." Haku responded weakly while trying to catch his breath again. His whole body hurt from being thrown around like a rag doll by Zabuza. Zabuza reached down and picked him up by the collar, lifting him off the ground before dropping him unceremoniously back down onto his feet. "Come on, brat, we need to talk." He said nothing else as they began walking to their house, gracefully given to them by the order of the Watcher. They had been staying in it ever since Zabuza first started training the new members of the cult. It served well enough. Once inside, Zabuza sat down on a couch before motioning for Haku to do so as well. "We need to discuss what we want from life." He spoke plainly. Haku was confused. Usually Zabuza would just order him around, as a tool, that was his purpose after all. He might ask for opinions or ideas, but at the end of the day, Haku did what Zabuza told him to. "We already got our goal," Haku said quietly while sitting down across from Zabuza. "Serve the cult, gain power." Zabuza nodded before responding. "That's the general idea, but now it's time to think more long-term." Haku looked up at him curiously. "How so?" "The cult that existed a few weeks ago is now the new government of Wave," Zabuza said seriously. "That would already be enough to put us in a position of relative power, but they have the support of that thing." He said the word thing with obvious discomfort. Haku felt the same way as Zabuza when it came to the Watcher. A creature not from this world, incomprehensible and terrifying. He still sometimes dreamed of it, him in an empty void, and in front of him a creature made of darkness and stars, looming over everything that exists. "The blessings are the real deal. The people I'm teaching are monstrous by normal standards, they learn faster than you did, and I already considered you the most talented person I've ever met," Zabuza admitted in a soft voice. "I expect all of them to become Jainin level in less than half a year." Haku ignored the warm feeling in his chest he got at being called talented by Zabuza. Zabuza then looked down at Haku with a frown on his face. "And if they get a blessing similar in power to mine, then they will be able to contend with any of the great villages in everything but numbers." Haku swallowed nervously but didn't say anything yet, waiting for Zabuza to finish speaking before saying anything. But he agreed, Zabuza's new blessing could be considered a bloodline by many. Not a major one, but a bloodline non-healous. "This isn't just a normal job, we have a chance to attach ourselves to something great." He finished with a sigh. "But..." Haku prompted quietly when it seemed like Zabuza wasn't going to continue. He rarely saw Zabuza like this, he always exuded confidence and surety, but now... "It's risky." He spoke solemnly. "It's all or nothing, the order of the Watcher can stand with the great villages, or it could be burned to the ground like Ozashiagakur. And you want my opinion on the matter?" Haku asked curiously, earning a nod from Zabuza. Haku felt conflicted. "But..." Zabuza and Haku walked inside the main shrine in Wave, where the Order of the Watcher currently operated from. They asked Hikari where Haruka was, and after being told she was in her office, they made their way there. Once inside, they were greeted by her. "Zabuza-san, Haku-san, how may I help you today?" she said politely with a warm smile, putting away some documents she was reading before their arrival. Zabuza reached upwards and took off his headband, taking it in his hands and staring at it for a moment before dropping to one knee, Haku following right behind him. He extended the headband toward her with both arms. "We would like to swear my loyalty to the order." He didn't see Haruka's reaction to his declaration, but he heard her shuffling around the table towards them. She carefully grabbed the headband from his open palm and laid a hand on top of his head, making him look up at her. She stared into his eyes intensely, searching his gaze for something. She must have found something because she smiled. It was a happy smile, genuine, something Zabuza had only seen directed at him by Haku. "I see, who am I to reject a fellow believer?" she said softly while clasping her hands together. "As the High Priestess of the Watcher behind the stars, I accept your offer of loyalty." Zabuza hated the practice of the Kirigakure Academy, so he ended it. Zabuza hated being weak, so he became strong. Zabuza hated wasted potential, so he took Haku as his own. Once, Zabuza hated the ugly side of the village he grew up in, so he tried to change it. He failed. By treacherous hands, the people who believed in him were slaughtered. He fled the place of his birth with a single boy and all his dreams burning in the flames of a revolution gone wrong. In his time wandering as a missing nin, Zabuza didn't really have anything he truly cared about, the closest thing being Haku. But Haku was nothing more than a tool he saw value in, much like his sword. He would one last time try to shape the world around him, he would allow himself to care, just one more time. And if this new cause burned before his eyes, he would burn with it. Attaboy, Zabuza. Don't worry, your trust is well placed. This was excellent news. I now had an experienced shinobi on call, someone who knew the game better than me. I can definitely work with this, I'm totally going to make him into a beast. Tomorrow next to his bed there's going to be a familiar vial of blood and a water blessing in cube form sitting on his bedside table. Haku will also get the water blessing, although I slightly modified it so he would heal based on how cold it is, but no blood. He made his own equipment with his ice, but I did want to give him something extra so he could compete with Zabuza's sailor potion. If I remembered right, his two big advantages were his speed and his ninjutsu mastery, and he also got that cool bloodline. Well, I think I know what to give Haku. His main issue is that if someone adapts to his speed, he is kinda boned, so let's give him some distractions. I manifested his new blessings on his bedside table, hope he likes them. The crows were doing fine. There was a big scare when some of the younger ones left the island and met Yatta for the first time. But after flying back and screaming about an actual star-eating monster, I asked Yatta to go down and introduce himself properly. That calmed them down. Now one of the little birds was running around that he would be just like Yatagarasu when he grew up. You can do it, kid, with enough hard work, you too can turn into a gigantic laser beam spewing crow monstrosity. Believe it. I checked my DP. DP, 2321. Good enough, making Star Eaters was expensive, and the blessings for my new shinobi weren't the cheapest thing either, but not like I needed something big right away. I think I'm gonna chill for a while, wait for things to stabilize for a bit, maybe get some more info on what other villages were doing about me. Haku slowly opened his eyes as sunlight shined through the window, groaning slightly as he stretched out his arms before sitting up in bed. He blinked a few times as he woke up fully, before noticing something odd sitting on top of his bedside table. It was a small blue cube, much like the one that Crow had offered as a potential reward, except this one was whiter in color. The second thing he noticed was a small wooden box that sat next to the cube. It was hand-carved and had an image of a snowflake engraved onto its lid. Confused, he carefully picked up the cube first, bringing it close to his face so he could examine it closely. It seemed fragile at first glance but felt surprisingly sturdy when handled. The cube suddenly crumbled into dust in his hands, which then rushed towards his chest, turning into smoke, before entering him through his heart. A strong surge of cold ran throughout his body, from the top of his head all the way down to the tips of his fingers and toes. But instead of it being uncomfortable or even painful, it was refreshing, almost soothing. The crow had said this would grant him the ability to create water from nothing, right? Haku raised his hand and focused on the feeling of water manifesting in front of him, willing it to appear with his mind. Almost immediately, a small sphere of water condensed out of thin air just above his palm, spinning slowly as if caught by an invisible current. It felt easy, no drain on his chakra at all. He let it float off his hand for a moment before focusing again, causing the orb to burst into ice needles that embedded themselves into the wall. Haku couldn't help but giggle. He excitedly reached out toward the box, placing it in his lap carefully. He removed the lid, revealing several dozen tiny marbles. He reached out for them, and just like the cube, they dissolved into smoke which rushed into his chest. This time, there wasn't a surge of cold running through him, instead, he felt a new presence inside him, an innate understanding of something. Ah! Haku said out loud, in slight awe. I think I'm supposed to say, praise the Watcher. Zabuza was grinning madly, his sword in hand, and another flying into the forest. With a single thought, the giant blade in the air disappeared. As if it had never been there, it simply ceased to exist. Now this was amazing, what more could you ask for? Zabuza didn't expect to be rewarded for his choice literally a day after pledging loyalty, yet here he was, watching with glee as Kubikaribch duplicated itself again. He heard a thunk from inside the house. Good timing, he wanted to test out the healing on the water blessing anyway. Haku! He called out towards the house. Get your ass over here. Haku appeared shortly afterward, he looked excited about something. Well, that could wait. Help me test my new gifts. Zabuza said bluntly while motioning to his sword. Haku nodded silently before asking. Do you mind if I try something first, Zabuza-sama? He asked politely, with a strange gleam in his eye. Zabuza just shrugged in response, causing Haku to step back a bit, before raising his hands in front of him. A steady torrent of water flowed out of his hands, causing Zabuza to grunt in surprise. Guess he also got the same blessing as him. Haku was freezing the water as it manifested, forming it into a dragon? Well, now he was curious. He let Haku continue until the long serpentine dragon was as tall as the house, while coiled up. Are you done? He asked when it became clear that he wasn't doing anything else to it. Haku shook his head. I need to do one more thing. Haku touched his chest and his hand sunk into it. That caused both of his non-existent eyebrows to raise. What the hell? He pulled out a marble, but before Zabuza could get a closer look at it, Haku tossed it towards the dragon. It sunk inside the ice construct, melting into it before being absorbed completely. The ice dragon twitched and slowly raised its head. It didn't roar, just because it was made from ice didn't mean it had vocal cords after all. But Zabuza could feel that it was looking at them. He grinned, what an interesting blessing, he felt many things right now, but none of them were regret. Chapter 18, 3 months later. 3 months later. He walked across the massive bridge that spanned for miles through the ocean, connecting the island of Wave to the land of Fire. When he heard that Wave was having a resurgence in every metric you could measure, he decided to come take a look himself. Maybe spend some time relaxing. He heard that Wave wasn't allowing any shinobi presence except with a constant escort. Although he didn't know how effective that was, it just might be an excuse to go after any shinobi they spotted within Wave. It would be nice to not have to deal with Hunter Nin for a while. He walked up to the checkpoint at the end of the bridge, where a few guards were stationed. They all wore different clothes, but all of them had the same white masks. He approached the small booth to the side, where one of them was sitting. Name and reason for your visit? She asked with an emotionless voice, which he assumed was caused by the mask. Yokotaka. He answered cheerfully, smiling. And I'm here on a vacation. She eyed him briefly before looking down at her paperwork again. Any association with a shinobi village or a shinobi organization? He shook his head. None whatsoever. The masked woman looked back up at him for a bit longer this time. He couldn't help but feel slightly anxious, before she shrugged and went back to her papers. You may enter. Yatagarasu watched as the group of initiates circled the camp, readying themselves to fight him. This group was the third batch and the latest that had completed their training with Zabuza Mamakai. So far, they were proving to be quite competent. The intelligence wing had been alerted that a suspicious number of people went missing in this area and adjacent islands. The Crow clan had been sent to scout out the situation. Once the presence of enemy shinobi was confirmed, the military wing of the order was notified, and a team was dispatched to eliminate them. Since the level of the enemy ninja didn't surpass that of a Chunin, it was decided that only new initiates would be sent after them, to gain combat experience against real foes. Yatagarasu was chosen to act as a hidden safety net. If the enemy proved too much for the initiates, he would intervene. They were doing well so far, showing good teamwork and strategy. They managed to surround the camp without being detected and had already incapacitated 3 enemy shinobi. There were 5 left, and the initiates apparently decided they had waited long enough. They all started weaving hand signs. 5 identical barrages of water bullets came from each initiate's position in the bushes, assaulting the remaining enemies. 2 of the 5 shinobi present were quickly struck down, one fell onto his knees, arms limp and broken from a desperate block. The last 2 barely managed to dodge at the last second by throwing themselves away from the attack. One of those was faster than expected. He readied himself to interfere, watching for any sign that the enemy was going to pose an unsurmountable opponent. The initiates split into 3 groups, one capturing the kneeling man, one went after the slower one of the 2 survivors, and the last went after the fast one. The first group managed to restrain their target without incident, the second almost got blindsided by a fireball jutsu but dodged in time. It didn't take them long to incapacitate their target afterward. The third group wasn't faring too well though. They had been on the offensive at first, but now they were being pressured by their opponent. The man was clearly skilled, using wind release jutsu to keep them at bay with devastating effect. The initiates had been forced to stay back to avoid being torn to shreds. Once the other groups saw that, they moved to support, leaving behind one initiate to guard the prisoners. As they arrived, the outnumbered shinobi ripped off his shirt. revealing several dozen black marks covering his body. He then reached into the bag he had tied to his pants and pulled out a syringe. Yatagarasu angled himself toward and let himself drop, bursting through the clouds. In the words of his creator, if the enemy is powering up or transforming in any way, shape, or form, deck them in the face. As he hurtled towards the ground at full speed, he opened his beak, preparing to obliterate this fool. Right as he plunged the needle into his chest, a beam of starlight engulfed him, exploding on impact. Yatagarasu slammed into the ground, his massive form shaking the surrounding earth, sending dirt and rocks everywhere. He took a step right, and a step left at the same time, two of him standing where there once was one. The smoke cleared, revealing the place where the shinobi had been. A monstrosity of muscle and white flesh stood there instead, half its side was burned and blackened. It roared with rage as it spotted Yatagarasu. Damn you! I was so close. So close to achieving perfection. The creature spoke with hatred, glaring at the Star Eater with pure rage in its eyes. Even Orochimaru would have bowed before. Its ranting was interrupted by another beam of starlight. In the words of his creator, when the enemy starts monologuing, don't fucking listen, deck them in the face. Truly, his creator was a wise being. The other body rushed forward and bit the thing's head off while it was recovering from the blow, killing it. The initiates stared in awe at him before kneeling down on the ground respectfully. Praise the Watcher! They said in unison. You did well, with more time you will only grow stronger. He rumbled softly, watching as they bowed their heads. Thank you, Yatagarasu-sama. One of them said gratefully. For assisting us. He caught in affirmation before flying up into the sky once again, disappearing into the clouds above. The body that killed the mutated shinobi disappearing. And so, Konoha's new 5th Hokage wishes to send a diplomatic party to Wave to discuss future relations between our two governments. The ambassador finished her report. She was one of the few members of Wave's government that was from the original 600 members of the Church of the Watcher. Haruka hummed thoughtfully, everything seemed to be going smoothly so far. They had almost managed to form a completely stable economy, trade was reopened with the outside world, Wave was the safest that it had ever been with the formation of the military wing, and the people were more or less content with their lives. A landslide happened? All the nearby faithful suddenly had an instinctive feeling of where they needed to dig to rescue the survivors. Food shortage? Somehow, crops yielded more than usual, just enough to make sure everyone was fed. Someone had an illness that Kazuo and his disciples could not cure? If they isolated themselves in prayer for 3 days, they would wake up on the 4th morning healed. She couldn't help but smile slightly at the thought, the Watcher always provided when they needed him most. Do you think it's genuine? She asked after a moment of contemplation. Or do they simply wish to gather information about us? I believe both are accurate. The ambassador answered quickly. The Hokage clearly wants to have an amicable relationship with our nation, she seems like an honorable woman, but she is also a shinobi. Shinobi are not the most trustworthy of people, Haruka agreed quietly. All right then, we will accept their request, we will petition the crows for someone that can watch them. Understood, I will deliver this message immediately. The ambassador said while bowing respectfully before leaving her office. She leaned back into her chair with a soft sigh as she watched the woman depart, closing her eyes as she felt herself relax slightly. Would you have been satisfied with this, Ayamu? She whispered softly. Chapter 19, A Little Calm Before the Storm. Zabuza frowned as he watched the group of boats coming toward Wave's shore, the markings on them were easy to identify as belonging to pirates. Just as I thought, it's a classic Kiri tactic. He said to Hikari, who was standing next to him. Send in small groups of pirate ships to steal resources, harass shipping lanes, and pillage ports, with rogue shinobi on board to make sure they succeed even with heavy resistance. Does this mean Kirigakure is going to start fighting us openly? Hikari asked with slight concern. No, but it means they are going to keep being pests. Zabuza responded firmly. They probably heard about our economic resurgence and decided to take advantage of it. If we kill them all, they will most likely stop, right? She asked curiously. After all, I don't think many would be willing to risk their lives by coming here after that. What came to Zabuza's face could only be described as a mix of disdain and amusement. You would think so, wouldn't you? He grunted while gesturing at Haku. Go intercept them. Haku nodded silently before vanishing into a swirl of ice. A moment later, he reappeared in the ocean, standing on top of the water. He reached into his clothes and took out several scrolls. He threw them high into the air, where they unfurled and opened, releasing 4 massive ice dragons. With another motion, he threw a marble towards each dragon, which sunk inside them. Zabuza watched as the ice dragons swam through the water with ease, making their way towards the pirate ships. In a few moments, they were at the boats, ripping them apart and dragging them underwater with little difficulty. "Ah, this might have been my fault, Hikari," he admitted after observing for a bit. "I see Hunter Nin." Hikari blinked in surprise before looking more closely at the scene unfolding before them. After a moment of searching, she saw what he was talking about. A group of pirates were swimming underneath the dragons, they had donned breathing apparatuses and were now approaching Haku from beneath him. Zabuza let out a sharp whistle, causing Haku to immediately retreat, vanishing in another swirl of ice. Moments later, he reappeared next to Zabuza once again. Zabuza grunted approvingly before turning back towards the Hunter Nin below them. He reached over his shoulder and grasped Kubikaribch tightly with one hand. He waited until the Hunter Nin surfaced, watching as they arranged themselves into formation around them. "Zabuza Mamakai." One of them spoke up coldly. "We are surprised to see you here." The demon of the hidden mist simply raised his giant blade threateningly in response. "Kill them!" he commanded Haku, who nodded silently again before disappearing once more, reappearing above the group of Kiri Nin. Zabuza didn't waste any time either, rushing forward and swinging his sword down with tremendous force, cutting through the first Hunter Nin easily enough. Really? Did they run out of competent Hunter Nin? This guy barely reacted. Another man tried to stab him from behind with a kunao, but he simply manifested his scales on his back, causing the blade to slide off harmlessly. He spun around swiftly, kicking out at his attacker's knee, shattering it completely. As the man crumpled to the ground screaming in pain, Zabuza brought Kubikaribch crashing down upon him. As he pulled his sword free from the corpse, he glanced over towards where Haku was fighting 3 Kiri Nin, all of them trapped in a dome made out of ice mirrors. Suddenly, a water dragon appeared, smashing into him and slamming him against the ground. Zabuza grunted in annoyance as he felt several of his ribs break from the impact. He got up quickly, though, glaring angrily at the Kiri Nin that had ambushed him. "Look who got too confident," the man said mockingly. "I was not expecting you, of all people, to fall for a simple genjutsu, demon." Zabuza didn't reply immediately, instead simply getting up and sheathing Kubikaribch on his back, causing the Hunter Nin to narrow his eyes in suspicion. "Did you give up?" the Kiri Nin asked arrogantly. "Giving in to despair after being struck by my technique? Stop fucking around, Hikari." Zabuza snapped impatiently, causing the Hunter Nin to stiffen suddenly, before collapsing to the ground. Hikari emerged behind him, appearing from thin air, wearing an amused smile on her face. "You're so mean, Zabuza," she pouted. "I was doing my best, but his spirit was stronger than expected." The Hunter Nin got up, movements jerky, and clearly out of his control, staring at them with empty eyes. Zabuza turned to look at Haku, who had just finished dispatching his 3 opponents. He dispelled the dome and came over to join them. "All of them still alive, I assume?" Hikari asked cheerfully. Haku nodded silently in confirmation. "Good." She grinned brightly before turning towards Zabuza. "Chop chop, Zabuza, all these fools won't interrogate themselves. I have a report for you, leader," Sasori said respectfully. He had recently heard some interesting news. "Oh? Please tell me." Pain responded, his voice distorted by the technique that relayed it. "One of my spies reported seeing the Jinkriki of the Rokubai entering the Land of Fire, heading towards Wave." Sasori explained carefully. "I thought you would like to know this. The Rokubai was currently uncontrolled by any of the great villages, its Jinkriki last seen traveling as a nomad throughout the Land of Water. This was an opportunity, capturing the Jinkriki would be easier if they were away from the great villages." "I see." Pain replied after a moment of silence. Haydn did express a desire to go to Wave. Sasori knew that Pain was being generous. Haydn probably ranted for hours about how he would love to slaughter every last member of the Church of the Watcher. He was not a subtle man. "Thank you for informing me, Sasori," Pain said sincerely. Sasori nodded respectfully before taking his, cutting off the connection. He might not like Deodara's foolish ideas, but he was glad the man was less infuriating than that mad beast in human skin. It had been almost half a year since his arrival to this world. Life was great, Everything was going swimmingly. But the order of the Watcher didn't exist in a vacuum, it would eventually get the attention of bigger powers. Today, I saw that happen for the first time. Konoha had sent a request for a diplomatic meeting. I didn't mind, I trusted Tsunade more than Hiruzen. Still, this was a sign that the future had changed even further from what I knew. Originally Wave was ignored until Konoha requested help after the pain attack on the village. I knew it was going to happen, but it still made me a bit uneasy. Talking about the future changing, don't think I didn't notice you, Utakita. I keep an eye on that bridge 24/7, just in case. I really hoped his seal was less unhinged than Naruto's, or I will cry. I was planning to let him explore a little bit before I showed up. Honestly, I kind of felt bad for the man, so he can enjoy his vacation for a few days before I show up and ruin it. The rest of my cult was doing great. Zabuza was chilling with Haku like the father-son duo they are. Haruka was an excellent high priestess. Hikari and Kazuo were great at their jobs. Kenji was still preaching, by the way, that crazy fucker would talk the ear off of anyone who even looked at him. The only reason he wasn't an important figure was because he simply didn't want to be. He preferred traveling around talking about me instead of staying in one place. And of course, Yatagarasu and his siblings continued being adorable. Currently, there were 6 Star Eaters, and I couldn't have been prouder of them. Speaking of crow-shaped things, the Crow clan was also doing well. Initially, they were tense about this whole situation but relaxed once they got used to it. They now were full devotees to the Watcher. Going from the Divine Realm and Wave back and forth, helping my cult in whatever they needed. All in all, I was thinking about what moves to make next. What other places could I spread my religion to? Chapter 20, Meeting a Beast. The sun was setting, and Utakita was sitting outside, enjoying a cup of tea as he watched the ocean waves gently lap against the shoreline. He had been here for 3 days already, and everything was peaceful. It was almost surreal after living on the road for so long. The people were friendly, the weather nice, there was no trouble. Honestly, it was suspicious, but it didn't look like he was going to find any issues. The people were all clearly content, safe, and well-fed. Enjoying your time? A voice said behind him, startling him into spilling his tea everywhere. Utakita quickly turned around while drawing his pipe, only to pause. A young man in simple clothes, covered in burn scars, was staring at him with a curious look on his face. How did he sneak up on him? Why did his eyes have golden rings? Utakita wasn't sure what to make of this person. He seemed harmless enough, but something about him made Utakita uneasy. I am sorry for scaring you. He apologized sincerely. That was not my intention. It's all right. Utakita sighed as he put away his weapon again. I am enjoying my time here. Wave is lovely. Indeed. The man nodded in agreement. I love this place dearly. The two of them sat there quietly for a few minutes before the man spoke once more. My name is Ayamu, by the way. He introduced himself politely. He didn't seem bothered at all by Utakita not introducing himself back. Are you new to Wave? The Jinchuriki asked with suspicion. No. Ayamu shook his head slightly. But, would you kindly answer a question for me? Utakita looked at him warily before nodding slowly. What could go wrong? This guy looked weak and defenseless. Go ahead. Since when are Jinchuriki so relaxed? Ayamu asked suddenly, causing Utakita to freeze in place for a split second before exploding into action. He pulled out his pipe and dipped it into his soap solution bottle, and blew into it. Ayamu looked at him with curiosity. Are you, all right? He searched his chakra, funneling into his pipe. He blew again, nothing happened. What are you doing? Ayamu asked patiently. With growing desperation, he blew harder. Nothing came out, no bubbles, just air. You're supposed to suck on a pipe, not blow into it, Ayamu said casually. I think you should calm down. Utakita didn't listen, instead deciding to do something he should have done the moment he laid eyes on the man. Run the fuck away. He turned around and bolted, but before he could even take a step, Ayamu's arm wrapped itself around his shoulder. Hey, hey! Where are you going? Ayamu said, now standing next to him. In a panic, Utakita drew on his tailed beast's chakra. He, for once, welcomed the acidic feeling of the chakra flowing through his pathways. Oh, that's how it works, now that's much more reasonable than whatever the fuck the Uzumaki came up with. As the chakra flowed into him, he elbowed Ayamu in the ribs. But the impact was muted, sinking into the man's flesh, he did not even react to it. "Let's go have a chat, shall we?" the scarred man said, as the world faded into darkness. Could I have done that in a more DP efficient manner? Yup. Was it funny? Absolutely. I stared down at my body, made of stars and darkness, just like my real body, except human-sized. These mindscapes are amazing, there was so much potential for dickery. "You're not dead," I informed the unresponsive form of Utakata. "I know this looks like hell, but you are, in fact, not dead." He blinked owlishly at me, which was fair. I too would be confused if I suddenly appeared inside an acid ocean with a whatever the fuck I was talking to me. "Is this some sort of genjutsu?" he asked after a while, apparently coming back to his senses. "Nope, genjutsu, or any of that," I replied. "What you see around you is a mixture of your seal and mind." The man's eyes widened slightly, but he remained quiet. "So, I need to go have a chat with a certain slug beast, you can stay here or come with, I don't care either way," I said, making my way towards the water. He seemed nervous. "Wonder why?" "I'll stay here." "All right then." With that, I started walking in the direction the acid was flowing from. Eventually, I reached a giant cage made from black bones. It looked like a rib cage honestly. The tailed beast inside the cage was looking at me with an intense stare, well, as intensely as possible with its little eye stalk things. I stared back. It was honestly kinda cute. "What are you?" it demanded after a while of our staring contest. "A god," I answered honestly. It kept staring at me, damn, only took 4 letters to stump it. "That's kinda disappointing, aren't you supposed to be like 1000 years old?" "No, you're not." "Yes I am," I countered immediately. "Don't be rude," I added for good measure. It growled at me. "Adorable. What do you want, human?" "Not human," I corrected it absently. "Some dumb fuck is trying to resurrect Kaguya, and has a pretty good chance," I said frankly. "I would like to prevent this." "Impossible," it muttered. "Only Father would be able to resurrect that monster, there is no other way. A pair of Rinnegan already exist. Now all that's left is a massive quantity of chakra in a body, which can be achieved by sealing the Juhobi into a powerful human." That made it pause. Tailed beasts were hard to read due to their weird physiology, but I think it was worried. "Why tell me this?" it asked quietly after a moment of silence. "What will you gain from telling me that my existence may be at risk?" "I want information. I know of Hago Romo and Hamura, I know the story of Indra and Ashura." My eyes narrowed dangerously. "What I don't know, is Kaguya besides the obvious, where did she come from? What was her goal? How was she sealed?" The slug hesitated before speaking again, clearly conflicted about something. "Kaguya came from another world, beyond the stars, she consumed the fruit of the god tree, becoming immortal and nigh invincible." It was taking its time in telling me the whole story. I didn't mind though, verifying if what I know is actually true is always important. I sat down and listened patiently. "And then Father died." Saiken finished his recounting of Kaguya's origin. "That was interesting, it cleared up some things about the god tree, Kaguya's true goal, and more importantly, confirmed that she wasn't the only one of her kind. That would be a problem for later." I filled him in on everything he wanted to know, starting with Madara creating the Rinnegan again to Obito's current plans. He took it all in silence, absorbing every little detail that he could get out of me. After that was over, I asked him a single question. "Do you want to be free?" Saiken seemed surprised by this sudden inquiry. "Yes," it said slowly. "But only if Utakata is allowed to live freely as well." It was my turn to be surprised. I didn't expect that. Maybe Utakata wasn't as hated by his bitch as Naruto was by Kurama. It would complicate things, since that would mean I needed to leave the power of a bitch inside Utakata while also freeing Saiken. Still doable, though. I didn't mind too much, I was going to try and prevent Utakata's death anyway. That would mean that you would lose the majority of your power. I warned the slug. "I don't care about my power," came the instant reply. I could hear the bitterness in its voice. "Very well, then we have a deal." I reached out my hand, and it looked at it strangely before sticking its pseudopod against my hand and shaking it awkwardly. I gathered a large amount of DP for a single purpose. to separate the mind and soul of Seiken from its chakra. Utakata sat silently amongst the sea of acid, having not moved an inch since that thing had left him alone here. He was trying to get a grip on his emotions, and failing miserably at it. He regretted coming to Wave now. He should have stayed away when he saw the white masks. This whole place reeked of trouble. He sighed dejectedly. What could he do? It was clear that he was completely outclassed by that creature. Whatever it was. Was everything just pointless resistance? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a gigantic black hole in the distance, a starry night sky shining within its depths. A massive hand reached out of it, grabbing something past the horizon before pulling back and disappearing alongside the portal. Before he could comprehend what just happened, he felt, lighter somehow, like some weight had been lifted off his shoulders. The world around him suddenly shook violently, as everything faded into nothingness once more. Utakata opened his eyes, only to blink in confusion. He felt like he just woke up from a nightmare. He stood up slowly, feeling disoriented and confused for a moment before noticing something on the ground nearby, his tea, now cold. He hesitantly pulled out his pipe, dipping it into his bamboo bottle, and blowing. A bubble emerged from it, to his relief. So that was all a dream? How strange, it had been many years since he had last fallen asleep without noticing. Now that he thought about it, when was the last time he had any vivid dreams? That nightmare was the first one in a very long time. And why did it feel so real? He shook his head, deciding that he didn't really need to think about it too much right now. He had a vacation to enjoy. See, all good. I said, now back in my Amo body, or rather my crow body shape-shifted into Amo's appearance. We were standing on top of a cliff, looking over the beach where Yukataka was resting. Hidden by my power. I see. The slug answered quietly, still processing everything that just happened. Seiken was currently smaller, maybe 2 meters tall instead of his previous gigantic size. His chakra signature was also significantly weaker than before. I hadn't spent that much DP on his new body, so he didn't have the titanic amount of chakra he had before, only about as much as Zabuza. Or rather, making a tailed beast's body was outside my budget. You now have a fully biological body, including a modified chakra system. I explained to the confused slug. This means you can grow stronger if you want. Or go eat bamboo and fuck off, I don't really care. The slug's eyes widened slightly at the thought of having freedom. You can also learn human jutsu if you'd like. A transformation jutsu would be useful so you could go around without being stared at. I added with amusement. It seemed almost stunned by this revelation, but nodded slowly after a moment of consideration. I will consider it. I eyed him for a second before materializing a scroll and throwing it at him. Actually, here, one transformation jutsu. I turned around and stared, walking away. Have a good life, Seiken. If you need anything, go to the Order of the Watcher. I called back over my shoulder. Now, time to make some plans.
Thanks for listening.